At the heart of the story are three lives destined to intertwine. Daniel, a 22-year-old photographer whose charm is both captivating and dangerous. Eleanor Bennett, an architect longing for a deeper connection. And Clara Matthews, a recent widow striving to regain her confidence. Their intertwined fates lead to an unexpected act of violence that reshapes their peaceful coastal town, forcing everyone to reevaluate their understanding of their neighbors. Daniel, at 22, carried himself with a maturity beyond his years. His striking 6-foot frame and easy smile turned heads wherever he went. But it wasn't just his looks that made him stand out. Daniel had a charisma that made everyone feel uniquely seen. Raised by a retired Army officer, Daniel learned independence early, picking up the discipline and observational skills that made him an exceptional photographer. He could capture moments that others might miss, which quickly made him popular in Willowbrook, where he had set up his own small photography studio. After completing high school, Daniel moved to Willowbrook, seeking both inspiration and independence. His father's old friend offered him a place to stay, giving him the freedom to explore his artistic ambitions without the pressure of immediate success. The locals quickly took notice of the new arrival. People of all ages found reasons to interact with him, drawn to his engaging personality and infectious enthusiasm. It was his neighbors, however, who would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Living on one side was Eleanor Bennett, whose life seemed perfect from the outside: successful career, beautiful home, and a respected husband. On the other side was Clara Matthews, a woman in her mid-40s, trying to rebuild her life after a devastating loss. Daniel's first significant encounter in Willowbrook occurred on a sunny morning, as he was capturing shots of the town's picturesque community garden. Eleanor Bennett approached, offering him a cup of freshly brewed coffee as a welcoming gesture. Their connection was instant, marking the beginning of a transformative journey for both. Eleanor appeared to lead an enviable life, a successful architect, a stunning home, and admiration from her peers. Yet, behind the polished exterior, her life was far from perfect. Married to Martin, a real estate developer whose career often kept him away, Eleanor felt their emotional connection fading after 15 years of marriage. Once full of dreams and creative energy, particularly in her writing, Eleanor now found her passions sidelined, her unfinished manuscripts gathering dust as her husband's career took precedence. The moment Eleanor met Daniel, an old spark was reignited. His fresh outlook and genuine interest in her stories rekindled her spirit. She found herself gravitating toward his studio whenever she could, her days brightened by each interaction. What began as casual conversations about art and architecture soon delved deeper. Daniel's enthusiasm for her writing reignited Eleanor's long-dormant passion, leading her back to the manuscripts that had once been her creative refuge. One evening, as Martin was tied up with yet another late meeting, Eleanor invited Daniel over to share some of her old manuscripts. In the quiet of her home office, surrounded by stacks of paper filled with the stories of her abandoned dreams, a palpable shift occurred. Daniel's hand brushed against hers as they flipped through the pages, sending a jolt of emotion through Eleanor. She turned to face him, her heart pounding. Daniel's gaze was curious, stirring feelings that had long been buried. Years of emotional neglect had led to this moment, a desperate yearning for genuine connection. Eleanor leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that was transformative. As she pulled back, the intensity of her emotions left her breathless and conflicted, but the spark Daniel had ignited was too powerful to ignore. Clara Matthews, at 45, was forging a new path. After the unexpected death of her husband, she had summoned the courage to reshape her solitary life. The loss had become final just a few months before Daniel moved in next door, leaving Clara emotionally vulnerable. Once vibrant and confident, prolonged grief had eroded her self-esteem. She doubted even the simplest decisions, from what to wear to how to manage her yoga studio. The tragedy had strained her finances and spirit, forcing her to move from the grandeur of her former home to a modest cottage in Willowbrook. Clara's initial meeting with Daniel took place on a blustery afternoon as she struggled with groceries outside her house. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped in to help, his warm smile giving her a sense of visibility she hadn't felt in years. As they put away the groceries, Clara found herself sharing details of her recent hardships, exchange stories, and share laughter that felt both invigorating and forbidden. The bustling setting offered the perfect camouflage, enabling them to merge with other patrons without attracting notice. However, the happiness these moments brought her was tinged with guilt. Sophie, ever perceptive to the moods around her, started sensing that something was amiss. Though she couldn't pinpoint what it was, A sense of disquiet troubled her. Isabel's demeanor had shifted, her smile seemed contrived, and she often seemed preoccupied during family meals. Occasionally, Isabel would excuse herself to answer phone calls, returning with an anxious expression. Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that her mother was concealing something, yet she lacked the experience in adult relationships to address it. Meanwhile, Michael remained oblivious to the mounting tension within his family. He stayed committed to his work, convinced that his provision was vital for their happiness. He often returned home drained, seeking comfort in the regularity of household life. His conversations with Isabel had shortened to concise and functional exchanges, which he attributed to her job stress rather than any underlying troubles. Michael frequently attempted to initiate discussions about household projects or future endeavors, but Isabel's aloof and distracted replies only added to his growing sense of frustration and bewilderment. They crafted detailed schemes to dodge any suspicions. Isabel often claimed she had late shifts at the police department or needed to stay for overtime, while Ethan would explain he was prepping for exams or putting in extra hours at the restaurant. Each meeting, veiled in secrecy, not only thrilled them but also intensified Isabel's internal struggle. She was aware she was straying from her commitments, yet the emotional bond with Ethan was overwhelmingly compelling. He made her feel cherished, valuable, and acknowledged, sensations that had become scarce in her life with Michael. One afternoon, while strolling through Portland's Forest Park, Isabel stopped on a hidden path to catch her breath. The air was brisk and the scent of the forest enveloped them. Ethan, vibrant and full of life, enthusiastically shared a tale from his youth. Listening to him, Isabel felt a wave of affection wash over her, shadowed by the stark reality of their situation. She pondered whether this new connection was worth the risks. Despite knowing the precariousness of their liaison, the enchantment of their shared moments was too tempting to forsake. Sophie's doubts kept mounting. She observed her mother intently, trying to decipher the shifts in her demeanor. The connection they once cherished now seemed compromised, and Sophie contemplated whether to address her concerns with Isabel. She thought about broaching the subject several times, but the fear of unsettling revelations deterred her. She hesitated to distress her mother, especially if her suspicions proved baseless. Michael remained blissfully unaware, immersing himself in his work and home responsibilities. Always the guardian and provider, the notion that his wife might be discontented or concealing something never entered his thoughts. For him, life appeared normal. Although he recognized an emotional distance, he dismissed it as a temporary phase. One afternoon, Sophie returned home early from classes, eager to surprise her mother with her favorite dish. Entering the house, she was met with an eerie quietness. The typical sounds of their family life were missing. No laughter, no sounds of television. After calling out for Isabel and receiving no reply, Sophie felt compelled to check her mother's bedroom. What she discovered there devastated her. Isabel's phone lay on the bed, its screen illuminated, displaying a sequence of text messages that were clearly meant to be private. Sophie's pulse raced as she picked up the phone, her hands shaking with both dread and resolve. She scrolled through the messages, each one confirming her gravest fears. The exchanges between Isabel and Ethan were rife with flirtation, yearning, and plans for future rendezvous. There was evident an emotional affair was underway. The realization made Sophie's heart plummet. Betrayal struck her profoundly, leaving her breathless. The thought that her mother, the woman she had revered, could engage in such deceit was unfathomable. A whirlwind of emotions, anger, sorrow, confusion, surged through her, overwhelming her senses and clouding her judgment. Sophie dropped the phone onto the bed, her mind swirling with turmoil. She felt shattered and betrayed, unable to reconcile the loving mother she had always known with the woman who had been sneaking around behind her back. Her anger surged as she realized her own boyfriend, Ethan, had been part of this betrayal. How could he do this to her? The man she trusted was now involved in her mother's infidelity. Later that evening, when Ethan came over to see Sophie, she didn't hesitate. They were in the living room, the same space where they had shared countless laughs and quiet moments. Now it felt like a battlefield. "Ethan," she said, her voice cold and firm, "we need to talk." Ethan looked confused. "What's wrong, Sophie? You seem upset." "Upset? That's an understatement. I found something today that changes everything." "What do you mean?" His face shifted to concern, but Sophie noticed a flicker of guilt. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I found texts on my mom's phone, texts between you and her. You both knew exactly." While helping Eleanor carry groceries, he narrowly escaped being seen by Clara. He ducked behind a car, pretending to retrieve a dropped item, his heart racing with the near miss. Each close call highlighted the precarious nature of his secret life, leaving him shaken by how easily everything could fall apart. As Eleanor and Clara grew more attached, they began to demand more of Daniel's time and attention. Eleanor, revitalized by her rediscovered passion for writing, started discussing the possibility of leaving her husband. determined. She envisioned a future with Daniel, filled with love and creative collaborations, and painted this dream vividly during their meetings. These conversations left Daniel both excited and terrified, unsure of how to respond to such intense declarations, especially given their age differences. Clara, more cautious about rushing into a new relationship, subtly brought Daniel closer into her life. She introduced him to her friends as the thoughtful young neighbor, but their affectionate exchanges and knowing glances revealed much more. She even hinted at holiday plans, suggesting that Daniel might meet her family during the festive season. The increasing expectations from both women compounded the complexity of Daniel's already precarious situation. He found himself trapped in conflicting commitments, agreeing to holiday engagements with both Eleanor and Clara, fully aware that he would inevitably disappoint one or both of them. As the pressure mounted, the toll on Daniel became evident. He lost weight, endured sleepless nights filled with anxiety, and developed a habit of nervously checking his phone and looking over his shoulder. He knew he needed to end one of the relationships, but was paralyzed by the thought of causing pain to either woman. Unbeknownst to him, his erratic behavior did not go unnoticed. Both Eleanor and Clara, initially blinded by their emotions, began to sense that something was wrong. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter the fragile balance Daniel had struggled to maintain. The carefully constructed facade Daniel had upheld unraveled dramatically on a crisp autumn evening at Willowbrook's annual festival. With the town square bustling with festivities, Daniel hesitated about attending, knowing that both Eleanor and Clara would be there. Ultimately, he decided that not showing up would arouse more suspicion than being present. As he mingled among the townspeople, he felt as though he were navigating a minefield, exchanging pleasantries while anxiously scanning the crowd for signs of Eleanor or Clara. Just as he began to relax, thinking he might avoid any drama, fate intervened. Eleanor, who was assisting at the bookstall, caught sight of Daniel and beckoned him over with a bright smile. As he approached, hesitantly, he noticed Clara at a nearby booth, arranging items for an art auction. Time seemed to slow as Daniel watched both women, unaware of each other's significance in his life, drawing closer to an unavoidable confrontation. Eleanor reached him first, her embrace lingering longer than a simple neighborly gesture. As she stepped back, her eyes glowing with affection, Clara joined them. Daniel's heart sank as he saw the puzzled and slowly dawning realization on their faces. A tense silence enveloped the trio, broken only when Eleanor, ever the gracious architect, extended her hand to Clara. Introducing herself, Clara responded in kind, her gaze shifting between Daniel and Eleanor, noticing the too familiar touch that lingered on Daniel's arm. The ensuing conversation became an intricate dance of innuendo and subtle implication. Both women, drawing on their instincts and the hints they had previously overlooked, began to piece together the reality of their shared connection with Daniel. Caught in the middle, Daniel was paralyzed, unable to offer any defense. His silence only deepened the growing suspicions of both women, sealing the fate of his double life. The tension reached its breaking point when Eleanor, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion, pointed out a distinctive manuscript she had written specifically for Daniel, a story he had carelessly left behind. In that moment, the full extent of Daniel's deceit was exposed to both women. Eleanor's face crumpled, tears welling up, while Clara's expression hardened into one of icy indignation. Without a word, they both turned and walked away, leaving Daniel alone, the weight of his actions crashing down around him. The repercussions were swift and brutal. As Eleanor and Clara departed in opposite directions, whispers spread among the festival goers. Onlookers who had witnessed their charged confrontation began to speculate, and soon rumors rippled through Willowbrook. Daniel, reeling from the sudden exposure of his deceit, fled the event. That night, he paced restlessly, alternating between frantic attempts to contact both women To Ethan's grieving family. Tried to portray Isabella Ruiz as a frail old woman who could not possibly have orchestrated such a crime. Randall painted Lina Castillo as the true mastermind, claiming that Isabella had been manipulated into covering up for her daughter-in-law. However, Isabella's stern demeanor on the stand did little to win the jury's sympathy, and they were clearly disturbed by the sordid details of the case. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury took just 2 hours to reach a verdict. Isabella Ruiz was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lina Castillo, though charged as an accessory to murder, received a lighter sentence of 25 years after cooperating with investigators. The verdict brought some relief to Victor's family, but the damage left behind by the shocking betrayal would never fully heal. Many felt that justice had been served, but Victor's tragic death and the circumstances surrounding it left a dark cloud over the Ruiz family for years to come. After the trial, life changed drastically for everyone involved. Isabella Ruiz, the mother convicted of murdering her son, was sent to a state prison in California. Despite her sharp wit and strong personality, life behind bars proved challenging. Isabella tried to maintain her dignity, but the isolation and stigma of her crime weighed heavily on her. In prison, she was often the target of gossip and disdain from other inmates. Over the years, Isabella's health began to decline, and in 2021 she contracted COVID-19 during a surge in cases. Despite efforts to treat her, she passed away alone in a prison hospital. News of her death made headlines, with some former friends and family expressing mixed feelings about her fate. Lina Castillo, Victor's widow, faced a different kind of consequence after her reduced sentence of 25 years. She served her time in a women's correctional facility, often reminiscing about her life before the murder. During her incarceration, she sought therapy to deal with her feelings of guilt and confusion about her relationships. Lina maintained her innocence regarding the actual murder but acknowledged her role in the events that unfolded. Amy Liu, the young yoga instructor who had become entangled in the scandal, also faced her own struggles. Though Amy was never charged with any crime, the fallout from the trial affected her reputation. She continued to work at the resort for a few years after the events, but the whispers of the affair haunted her. In search of a fresh start, Amy eventually moved to Los Angeles, California, where she enrolled in college. Clara joined them. Daniel's heart sank as he saw the puzzled and slowly dawning realization on their faces. A tense silence enveloped the trio, broken only when Eleanor, ever the gracious architect, extended her hand to Clara. Introducing herself, Clara responded in kind, her gaze shifting between Daniel and Eleanor, noticing the too familiar touch that lingered on Daniel's arm. The ensuing conversation became an intricate dance of innuendo and subtle implication. Both women, drawing on their instincts and the hints they had previously overlooked, began to piece together the reality of their shared connection with Daniel. Caught in the middle, Daniel was paralyzed, unable to offer any defense. His silence only deepened the growing suspicions of both women, sealing the fate of his double life. The tension reached its breaking point when Eleanor, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion, pointed out a distinctive manuscript she had written specifically for Daniel, a story he had carelessly left behind. In that moment, the full extent of Daniel's deceit was exposed to both women. Eleanor's face crumpled, tears
He grappled not only with the public scandal of his wife's betrayal, but also the shock of her drastic actions. He withdrew from his public life, taking a leave of absence from his real estate business. The inquiry also highlighted Eleanor's significant emotional turmoil leading up to the incident. Neighbors and acquaintances, who had previously been hesitant to get involved, came forward with observations of her increasingly unstable behavior and mental distress. These accounts became crucial in shaping her legal defense. Clara Matthews's relatives, shocked and grief-stricken, traveled from afar to cope with their loss. The investigation also scrutinized the firearm involved. Legally registered to Martin, the gun had been carelessly stored, raising legal questions about his responsibility in the tragedy, further complicating an already intricate legal case. The trial of Eleanor Bennett began 6 months after the incident. Prosecutors portrayed her as a calculating murderer, driven by jealousy, citing her premeditated retrieval of the firearm and her deteriorating mental state as evidence of her intent. In contrast, the defense argued that Eleanor was a victim of her circumstances, pushed to the brink by emotional betrayal and overwhelming stress. They called upon experts to testify about how prolonged emotional distress could impair judgment. Daniel's testimony was a pivotal moment in the trial. His detailed account of the relationships and events leading up to the shooting provided essential context, though his time on the stand was visibly distressing for everyone involved. After extensive testimonies and careful deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Eleanor was found guilty of second-degree murder, a verdict less severe than what the prosecution had sought. The judge, taking into account the unique circumstances and Eleanor's previously clean record, sentenced her to 18 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 12 years. In the years that followed, the residents of Willowbrook struggled to recover from the upheaval. The community, once a symbol of peace and neighborly unity, now bore the scars of the tragedy. The events of that chilling November day remained a somber reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic neighborhoods, deep-seated emotions and turmoil can lead to catastrophic outcomes. Today, we venture into the hidden shadows of what seemed like a normal suburban marriage, where the secrets shared between a young wife and her much older gynecologist led to a tragic, fatal conclusion. How does an illicit affair, steeped in manipulation and fear, devolve into blackmail and ultimately cold-blooded murder? Lily Evans had always been known as the quiet one. Raised in a small town in Nebraska as the middle child in a family of 5, her siblings were always in the spotlight, outgoing, successful, and the embodiment of everything her parents admired. Her father, Peter Evans, a strict and no-nonsense factory manager, placed great value on hard work and achievement. Her brothers, both athletes, basked in the praise and attention she never received. Lily, on the other hand, was shy and introverted, often relegated to the shadows of her siblings' accomplishments. Her mother, Susan, though kind-hearted, rarely stood up to Peter, leaving Lily to contend with her feelings of neglect all on her own. As Lily grew older, this unmet need for attention became a deeply ingrained part of her personality. She excelled academically, though in a quiet, understated way that made her achievements easy to overlook. While her brothers were celebrated for their sports victories in high school, Lily quietly graduated with honors, her achievements going largely unnoticed. She found a sense of refuge working part-time at a local cafe after school, though she often felt invisible behind the counter. By the time she graduated in 2005, Lily had become accustomed to blending into the background. Soft-spoken and frequently overlooked, she sought solace in her own quiet world. Friends came and went, but none stayed for long. She longed for someone who would truly notice her, who could see beyond her reserved demeanor and appreciate her for who she was. This deep-seated desire for validation would later play a significant role in shaping many of her future relationships. In 2007, during a shift at the cafe, Lily met Chris Evans. He was everything she wasn't: outgoing, ambitious, and charismatic. He saw her in a way no one else had before. Their first conversation occurred when Chris stopped in for coffee while on a business trip. He was immediately drawn to her, and for the first time in her life, Lily felt truly seen. They quickly became inseparable. Chris adored Lily's calm and nurturing personality, while she reveled in the way he made her feel important and valued. By early 2008, to the surprise of their families, they were married. Chris was always supportive, constantly encouraging Lily to pursue what made her happy. At the same time, he had just launched a promising career as a sales manager, with his future looking bright. Meanwhile, Lily had dropped out of community college, unsure of what she truly wanted in life. Her enthusiasm for her studies had waned as she focused more on building a life with Chris. By the latter half of 2008, they had moved into a modest home in their small Nebraska town. Shortly after, Lily discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and anxiety. While excited about the prospect of motherhood, she was also uncertain about whether she was ready. Having always struggled with self-confidence, the idea of raising a child without the emotional support she had missed in her own upbringing triggered her deepest insecurities. Could she truly be a good mother? Could she provide the love and stability she had always longed for but never fully received? Chris, on the other hand, was overjoyed about the baby, and his excitement helped alleviate some of her doubts. Yet, deep within, Lily still couldn't shake the persistent need for reassurance, for someone to fill the emotional void left by her distant upbringing. In early 2010, as her pregnancy progressed, Lily Evans was referred to Dr. Harold Benson, a renowned and highly respected gynecologist. At 46, Dr. Benson had earned a stellar reputation as one of the best in the region, with decades of experience to his name. He was known for his professionalism and the compassionate care he offered to all his patients. On the morning of September 3, 2011, however, everything changed. Lily disappeared. Her husband, Chris, reported her missing after she failed to return from what he assumed was a routine checkup. Little did he know that visit would be anything but routine. Later that night, police were summoned to Dr. Benson's clinic after a cleaner made a horrifying discovery: Lily's lifeless body. She had been strangled with a leather belt and hidden carefully in a back storage room, the door locked. The scene was unsettling in its precision. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses. It was evident that Dr. Benson had meticulously planned every detail of the murder. Despite his esteemed standing, a closer look into Dr. Benson's life exposed something far more sinister. While outwardly a respected figure in the community, behind the facade of a family man was a deeply insecure individual who had developed a dangerous obsession with his younger patient, Lily. She had unwittingly become the object of his fixation. By the end of 2010, Lily's life had begun to spiral in ways she could never have anticipated. What started as routine medical appointments slowly morphed into something far more sinister, something that weighed heavily on her. Dr. Benson's role in her life shifted from being her gynecologist to someone who exerted an unsettling control over her. Their affair developed gradually, starting with long, seemingly innocent conversations during her appointments. He asked deeply personal questions about her childhood, her marriage, and her anxieties about motherhood. With each question, Lily felt increasingly exposed, more vulnerable than she had ever been with anyone before. Dr. Benson approached her cautiously. In the early months, he never pushed too far, never crossed the line that made her uncomfortable. Yet there was always an underlying tension in his tone. Lily couldn't help but be drawn to the attention he gave her, the attention she had been longing for. Over time, the lines blurred until they disappeared entirely. What began as harmless flirtation evolved into a dangerous escape from her quiet, unremarkable life. She convinced herself it was temporary, just a phase, something she would move past. But by November 2010, the reality was undeniable. Secret late-night meetings had begun. After the clinic closed and the staff had left, Dr. Benson would lock the doors, shut off the cameras, and tell her whatever she needed to hear to keep her coming back. Lily hated to admit it, but part of her craved those encounters. He made her feel alive, seen, and special in ways that no one else, not even Chris, ever had. But the guilt soon started eating away at her. Chris remained the loving, dedicated husband he had always been, working tirelessly to secure their family's future. Meanwhile, Lily was suffocating under the weight of her deceit. Every time she saw Chris, the guilt gnawed at her, and the burden of her shame grew heavier. She told herself repeatedly that she needed to end the affair, that she couldn't continue down this destructive path. But every time she tried to pull away, Dr. Benson found new ways to keep her entangled in his grip. By December 2010, Lily had attempted to end her affair with Dr. Benson several times. She told him it had to stop, that she couldn't continue deceiving her husband, Chris. But Dr. Benson wasn't the kind of man who took rejection lightly. He had grown accustomed to the control he wielded over Lily, and the idea of losing her wasn't something he was willing to accept. His attitude shifted during their conversations. The once kind, understanding doctor turned cold and calculated. He reminded her of the messages they had exchanged, the intimate moments they had shared in secret. It was no longer just about the affair. It was about power. Dr. Benson knew exactly how to exploit her deepest insecurities. He made it clear that with one word, he could destroy her life. If Chris found out, everything she had built would crumble. The thought of losing her marriage and everything she cared about terrified Lily, and Dr. Benson was well aware of that. Initially, his threats were subtle, but they soon became more direct. He warned her that if she tried to leave him, he could ruin her marriage with a single message to Chris. Lily's anxiety escalated with each passing day. By late December, The weight of her situation had become unbearable. She spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had spiraled so far out of control. What had once seemed like a thrilling escape from her ordinary life had turned into a suffocating trap, and she felt helpless to escape it. Every time she returned to Dr. Benson's office, she felt her grip on her life slipping further away. His once charming smile and soft words now felt like chains binding her to him. She was no longer in control. He was. With her baby due in a few months, Lily became desperate to break free before it was too late. But each attempt to end things only made the situation worse. Dr. Benson would remind her of the incriminating evidence he had, photos, messages, and under the pressure, she would cave. How could she confess to Chris, the man who had given her everything, that she had been unfaithful? The thought of breaking his heart was unbearable. She felt trapped, consumed by fear, weighed down by the secrecy and lies. It was all too much for her to handle. By early February 2011, Lily had reached her breaking point. The guilt had become unbearable, and she knew she couldn't continue living like this. She had tried countless times to end it quietly without confrontation, but Dr. Benson refused to let her go. He wanted to keep her under his control, and as long as he had power over her, there was no escape. On the afternoon of February 3, 2011, Lily made a final decision. She couldn't continue living in fear. She had to confront him and end things once and for all. If he refused, she would confess everything to Chris, regardless of the consequences. She couldn't keep living in constant dread, waiting for her lies to catch up with her. That evening, as she walked into the clinic, the nervous excitement she had once felt at the start of their affair was gone. In its place was a cold determination. She had to take back control, even if it meant risking everything. But as she stepped into Dr. Benson's office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. He sensed that something was different. Lily was no longer the timid woman he had manipulated for months. She confronted him, telling him it had to end, that she would confess everything to Chris if he didn't let her go. She laid all her cards on the table, unaware of how far he was willing to go to protect his secret. Dr. Benson's reaction was nothing short of chilling. His expression shifted from shock to something far more sinister. He was a man cornered, faced with a choice. Would he let Lily go and risk losing everything? Or would he take drastic measures to ensure his secret remained hidden? As February turned into March, the tension between Lily and Dr. Benson intensified. Lily had no idea of the dark thoughts consuming him, no clue just how far he was prepared to go to maintain his control over her. What had once been a thrilling, forbidden affair had now become a ticking time bomb, ready to detonate at any moment. Lily was no longer just a woman trapped in a poor decision. She was caught in a nightmare with no clear escape. Their confrontation had set something in motion, something that would alter both of their lives forever. On the morning of September 3, 2011, the quiet routine of their Nebraska town was shattered. Lily Evans, who had left for what her husband Chris assumed was a routine checkup with Dr. Benson, never came home. Chris, who had always trusted the doctor to care for his wife and their unborn child, grew increasingly anxious as the hours ticked by. By the afternoon, his concern had escalated into full-blown panic. Lily never stayed out without telling him where she was, and he knew something was terribly wrong. Desperate, Chris called the clinic, hoping to hear that Lily had simply stayed late due to a complication or an extended conversation with the doctor. But no one had seen or heard from Lily since her appointment earlier that morning. The clinic staff was as clueless about her whereabouts as Chris was. By that evening, overwhelmed with dread, Chris reported Lily missing to the police. What followed would uncover a horrifying truth. Later that night, around 9 p.m., a cleaner at Dr. Benson's clinic was finishing her usual after-hours duties. As she moved through the rooms, wiping down surfaces and tidying chairs, she noticed an odd smell coming from the back storage room, an area that was rarely used. Feeling uneasy, she opened the door. What she found inside would haunt her for the rest of her life. Hidden behind a pile of medical supplies was Lily's lifeless body. She had been strangled with a leather belt, and her body had been carefully positioned, as though Dr. Benson had gone to great lengths to conceal her. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence that Lily had fought back. The scene was disturbingly precise, meticulously planned, as if Dr. Benson had thought through every detail to avoid suspicion. From the moment the police arrived, it was evident that this was no crime of passion. It was a cold, calculated murder. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. No one could believe that a trusted doctor, a man who had served the community for so many years, could be capable of such a monstrous act. Dr. Benson had always been regarded as a model professional, someone people turned to in their most vulnerable moments, especially women like Lily, who had depended on him during one of the most delicate times in her life. But as investigators dug deeper into Dr. Benson's personal life, they uncovered a terrifying reality. The respectable image he had carefully cultivated over the years was nothing more than a facade, hiding a far darker truth. On September 5, 2011, Police brought Dr. Benson in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. He insisted that he had seen Lily earlier that day for a routine checkup and that she had left the clinic shortly afterward. But as investigators continued to press him, cracks began to appear in his story. He couldn't explain why Lily's car was still parked at the clinic or why her phone last pinged near the office at the time she was supposed to have left. By September 10th, forensic investigators uncovered the evidence that would ultimately seal Dr. Benson's fate. Lily's DNA was found on the belt used to strangle her, and security footage from nearby cameras showed her entering the clinic but never leaving. It became evident that Dr. Benson hadn't just killed Lily, he had carefully orchestrated every detail of her murder. As the investigation progressed, even more disturbing revelations surfaced. Several former patients came forward with stories of inappropriate comments, lingering touches, and unwanted advances. While these encounters hadn't escalated to the same level as Lily's relationship with Dr. Benson, they painted a troubling picture of a man who had been crossing professional boundaries for years. It became clear that Dr. Benson had been using his position of power to manipulate vulnerable women, all while maintaining an outward appearance of professionalism. Lily was just one of many targets, but unlike the others, she had tried to break free. When she threatened to reveal the truth, Dr. Benson's obsessive need for control pushed him to commit the ultimate act of violence. He couldn't let Lily tell her husband or risk the collapse of his entire career. In his twisted mind, silencing her was his only option. As the case against Dr. Benson grew stronger, the town was gripped by a mix of disbelief and fear. How had no one noticed the darkness lurking beneath his calm demeanor? How many other women had suffered in silence, too afraid to speak up? By September 15th, the evidence was overwhelming. Police formally arrested Dr. Benson, leaving the community reeling from the horrifying realization that one of their most respected citizens had been living a double life. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues were in shock as the story dominated the media. This wasn't just about Lily's murder. It was about years of hidden desires and the slow unraveling of a man who had spent his life shrouded in secrets and manipulation. The trial, which began in early 2012, became a spectacle that captured the attention not only of the small Nebraska town but of the entire nation. Dr. Benson's defense team argued that his relationship with Lily had been consensual and that she had become emotionally unstable, threatening to ruin his life. They claimed that her erratic behavior had forced him to act in self-defense. However, the prosecution built a far more compelling case. They depicted Dr. Benson as a man consumed by obsession, someone who had systematically preyed on vulnerable women, and when he faced the loss of control over Lily, he resorted to murder. The most damning evidence came from the forensic experts. The precision with which Lily had been strangled, the careful way her body had been hidden, and the lack of defensive wounds all pointed to a premeditated crime. Dr. Benson hadn't acted out of fear or panic. He had planned Lily's murder the moment she threatened to confess to her husband. On April 10, 2012, after just 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Dr. Harold Benson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom fell into silence as the judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Chris, Lily's family, and the community, the verdict brought a sense of justice, though it could never bring back the woman whose life had been tragically cut short by the man she had once trusted. Dr. Benson's fall from grace was swift and irreversible. A man once regarded as a compassionate and trusted doctor was now a convicted murderer, his name forever linked to the dark secrets he had fought so hard to keep hidden. Yet, for those who had known Lily, especially for Chris, the pain of losing her would never fully heal. The trial had exposed the extent of Dr. Benson's obsession, but it also left behind many unanswered questions. How many other lives had been impacted by his actions? How many more secrets lay buried in the past, still unrevealed? In the end, Lily Evans's murder served as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the most trusted of faces. As Dr. Benson began his life behind bars, the small town was left to pick up the pieces, haunted by the memory of a woman whose life had been stolen by a man who had once vowed to care for her. Yet many were left wondering, was this truly the whole story? Could a seemingly dedicated doctor really transform into a cold-blooded murderer? Lily's story stood as a tragic reminder that even those we trust most may harbor the darkest of secrets. In the heart of a lively London neighborhood, a respected teacher, adored by her community for her seemingly perfect life, hides a dark secret. Her manipulative affair with her father-in-law triggers a series of events that lead to murder. This is the story of Emily Peterson, a woman whose obsession with control and independence spirals into a deadly tragedy that shocks everyone around her. Emily Peterson, 36, seemed to live a life many envied. She had the image of a dedicated teacher,
actively involved in every school and community event. People often admired her devotion to her family, especially to her husband Thomas, who worked tirelessly managing his chain of flower shops. While Thomas focused on expanding the business, Emily stayed at home, raising their children Lily and Max, instilling values of responsibility and kindness in them. During this time, George Williams, Thomas's father, now 65, had retired from the business to enjoy his free time. Once a successful businessman, George was known for his wisdom and insights, frequently attending local events and offering advice to younger generations in the area. After losing his wife, George became more reclusive, though he still maintained a strong presence in the community. Emily admired George from afar, viewing him as a source of strength and stability. However, by 2010, her marriage to Thomas had grown distant. Thomas's focus on the flower shops consumed all his energy. He left early in the morning and returned late at night, always exhausted. Their conversations had dwindled to brief exchanges about bills and the children. The warmth they once shared had faded, leaving Emily feeling isolated, unappreciated, and emotionally neglected. In those lonely moments, Emily turned to George. At first, their interactions were innocent, casual chats after neighborhood events or quick conversations at family gatherings, but gradually their discussions grew deeper. By early 2011, Emily and George had become closer. With Thomas constantly busy, George frequently visited the house, filling in roles Thomas couldn't. Emily appreciated how George always made time for her. Unlike her husband, George listened to her frustrations, sympathized with her struggles, and offered comforting words. George, still grieving his late wife, found solace in Emily's company. He had never fully recovered from his wife's passing in 2009, and though he remained composed, the pain lingered. He saw in Emily a kindred spirit, someone suffering in silence as he was. Their conversations often revolved around their personal difficulties, with George confiding in Emily about how empty his house felt since his wife passed away. Emily, in return, shared how abandoned she felt in her marriage, explaining how Thomas no longer noticed or appreciated her. This shared vulnerability forged a deep emotional bond between them. By mid-2011, George began visiting more often, offering to help around the house or spend time with the children. But both of them knew something was changing. The lines between father-in-law and daughter-in-law blurred. Emily, who had always been seen as a devoted wife, began to enjoy the power she had over George. She could see the effect she had on him, how his demeanor softened whenever they were alone. Gradually, Emily began to manipulate the situation, carefully playing into George's emotions while keeping up her image as the devoted daughter-in-law. She would talk about how much she missed having a partner who truly cared for her, knowing that George, in his vulnerability, would fall into that role. She frequently brought up topics of loss and loneliness, aware that George's emotional fragility would keep him conflicted. By the end of 2011, their relationship had crossed from emotional to physical, though it remained hidden beneath layers of secrecy and guilt. George, torn between his grief and his deepening attachment to Emily, wrestled with the affair. Emily, on the other hand, faced no such struggle. For her, the affair was all about control. She relished the power she wielded over George, a man once considered untouchable in the community. It wasn't love driving her actions, but a calculated thirst for something more. She had grown weary of being the dutiful wife, living in Thomas's shadow. George, with his influence and wealth, became her means to an end. Everything took a dark turn on March 6, 2014, when the police were called to the Peterson residence. Thomas's body was found in the greenhouse, his head brutally struck with a heavy object. What had once been a peaceful retreat where Thomas indulged his love for plants had turned into a crime scene. Blood splattered across the floor, leaving the community reeling in shock. Looking back at early 2012, when their meetings became more frequent and their conversations darker, George, consumed with guilt, often spoke of ending the relationship, citing fear of the consequences. But Emily always convinced him otherwise, using her emotional grip to keep him close. She reminded him of how lonely they both were, how Thomas's neglect of her was unjust, and how they deserved happiness, even if it came at a price. By this point, George was too entrenched in the affair to break free. Emily's manipulation grew more cunning as time passed. She subtly began planting the idea that Thomas's absence would not only be a relief but a necessity. She hinted at how much simpler life would be without Thomas's constant focus on the business, without him always being in the way. George, emotionally drained and fragile, started to agree. He began seeing Thomas not as his son but as an obstacle to the life he and Emily could share. By mid-2013, Emily had gained complete control over George. He was willing to do anything to keep her in his life, even if it meant betraying his own family. But Emily was already looking ahead. She saw a chance to not only free herself from her marriage but also take over the family business. George was aging, and she knew it wouldn't be long before control of the flower shops passed to her. But first, Thomas had to go. As their affair deepened, so did Emily's schemes. By January 2014,
She had begun carefully setting the stage for Thomas's demise. She was patient, calculating, and knew her moment was coming. What had started as a secret affair had turned into a dangerous game of manipulation, with George as her pawn and Thomas as her target. On March 2, 2014, everything began to unravel in the Peterson household. What had been quietly brewing for years behind closed doors finally reached its breaking point. Emily, always in control, decided it was time to act. She knew she could no longer uphold the charade of her life. Her affair with George had become more than just a secret. It was now a tangled web of lies and manipulation, threatening to come crashing down. George, weighed down with guilt, hesitated. The gravity of his actions overwhelmed him, and the thought of committing an even greater sin, the murder of his own son, paralyzed him with fear. But Emily was relentless. She had spent years mastering the art of manipulating George, exploiting his weaknesses. She knew exactly how to push George just enough to get what she wanted without scaring him off. Emily framed their situation in a way that allowed him to justify the unthinkable. George, torn between his feelings for Emily and the moral values he once held dear, felt trapped. He believed her when she said that Thomas's death was inevitable, that it was the only way for them to escape the lies. She convinced him it was necessary, a way to cleanse their lives and start fresh. Emily's plan was cold and calculated, like everything else she did. She had thought through every detail, aware that George's fragile emotional state made him easy to manipulate. The plan was simple but ruthless, leaving little trace. She gave George clear instructions, reassuring him that once it was done, they would finally be free. No more secrets, no more guilt. George, despite his inner turmoil, let his emotions cloud his judgment. He was too far gone, too deeply in love with Emily to turn back now. 4 days later, on the night of March 6, 2014, the plan reached its violent conclusion. The Peterson household, usually quiet and peaceful, became the site of a horrific crime. Thomas's lifeless body was discovered in the greenhouse, his head shattered by a heavy object. Blood pooled around him, staining the floor where he had once tenderly cared for his plants. The greenhouse, once a place where Thomas found peace in his work, was now marred by violence and death. The discovery of Thomas's body sent shockwaves through the community. News of the tragedy spread quickly, with neighbors gathering outside the Peterson home, confused and disturbed. The family was well known in the neighborhood, and Thomas's flower shops had long been a staple of the local economy. The idea that such a brutal crime could befall someone so respected was unimaginable. The police arrived quickly, led by Detective Martin Collins, a seasoned investigator with years of experience handling violent crimes. As he surveyed the scene, Collins immediately sensed something was amiss. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing seemed to be missing. The initial theory of a robbery gone wrong, which seemed plausible at first, quickly fell apart. This crime was personal. Its precision and brutality pointed to someone close to Thomas. By March 8, 2014, the investigation was in full swing. The police began interviewing everyone connected to Thomas, starting with Emily. She played the role of the grieving widow almost flawlessly, but to Detective Collins, something seemed off. Emily appeared upset, but her tears seemed too controlled, her emotions too calculated. She calmly explained how Thomas had come home late the night before the murder and how she had gone to bed early, unaware of anything unusual. Despite her composed demeanor, Collins couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Emily's behavior after the murder was odd. In the days following the tragedy, she didn't appear genuinely grief-stricken. Her routine barely changed. While others in her position might have been overwhelmed by sorrow, Emily carried on as if nothing significant had occurred. Her lack of genuine emotion raised red flags for the detective. Something about her story just didn't add up. Then, on March 20, 2014, a breakthrough came when a hidden phone was found in Emily's closet. The discovery blew the investigation wide open. The phone contained explicit text messages between Emily and George, revealing the full scope of their affair. The texts were detailed, discussing their plans to get rid of Thomas and even hinting at the exact day they would do it. George appeared hesitant in the messages, but it was clear that Emily had orchestrated everything,
pushing him toward committing the unthinkable. With this new evidence, Detective Collins knew the investigation had reached a critical turning point. George's involvement was undeniable, and the truth was now just a matter of time. Emily, however, continued to deny everything, insisting the messages were nothing more than fantasy. She portrayed herself as the victim, claiming George had misunderstood their conversations. She painted George as a grieving man who had manipulated her, casting herself as an innocent woman caught in a tragic misunderstanding. But George's guilt was too great to conceal. After the evidence surfaced, he began to unravel. By April 1, 2014, George had completely withdrawn from his usual social circles and family gatherings. His once strong presence had crumbled, and he could barely look his grandchildren in the eyes. The weight of his actions consumed him. He no longer spoke about the future or offered advice. He was a shell of the man he once was, destroyed by his own guilt. When the police finally brought him in for questioning on April 1st, George's calm facade shattered. Confronted with the phone records, George broke down, confessing to the affair. He explained how Emily had drawn him in, using his grief and vulnerability to manipulate him. He admitted that he had fallen for her, but he strongly denied any involvement in Thomas's murder. George described how the affair had spiraled out of control, but he couldn't bring himself to confess to the ultimate crime. Emily, however, remained composed as George confessed. She stuck to her story, continuing to claim that the messages were simply part of a fantasy and denying any plot to harm Thomas. She placed all the blame on George, insisting he had acted out of desperation. But the overwhelming evidence, combined with George's broken confession, told a different story, one of a manipulative woman who had carefully orchestrated her husband's downfall. As the case moved forward, the community was left reeling from the betrayal, wondering how such darkness had been hidden beneath the surface of such a respected family. On April 15, 2014, the quiet streets of the London neighborhood buzzed with shock as both Emily and George were arrested for Thomas's murder. The news spread rapidly, reaching every corner of the community. This was no ordinary crime. It was a betrayal that cut deep, shaking the very foundation of the Peterson family. A family once admired for their success and respectability, Emily had always been seen as the devoted wife, while George had long been respected as a wise and strong figure. The revelation of their affair and involvement in Thomas's death left everyone in disbelief. The trial, which began in early 2015, became a spectacle, drawing crowds from across the city. The courthouse was packed every day with neighbors, colleagues, and even the local media eager to witness the downfall of a family that had once seemed perfect. Cameras captured every moment, and reporters painted Emily as a cold, calculating woman who had manipulated an old man into killing her husband. George, the once proud and respected elder of the community, appeared broken. He looked older than his 65 years, his shoulders slumped, and his face gaunt, as though the weight of his actions had drained the life out of him. Throughout the trial, George broke down multiple times, overwhelmed with guilt. He admitted to the affair, explaining how Emily had slowly gained control of him, drawing him deeper into her web of manipulation. He described how he had never intended for Thomas to die, insisting that his involvement had spiraled out of control under Emily's influence. His remorse was evident, and many in the courtroom felt sympathy for him, but his confession, although filled with regret, did little to absolve him of his role in the crime. Emily, in stark contrast, exuded confidence. She sat in the courtroom with a calm and composed demeanor, showing no signs of guilt like the kind that consumed George. Even as the gruesome details of the murder were laid out, she remained firm in her defense, claiming that George had acted on his own and that she had never intended for things to escalate so far. She maintained that their messages, which clearly outlined a plan to kill Thomas, were nothing more than a fantasy misunderstood by an old man who had become infatuated with her. To the jury and everyone watching, Emily's lack of remorse was chilling. Her cold detachment from the events made it clear that she was the mastermind behind the entire scheme. She had manipulated George from the start, exploiting his vulnerability and using his love for her as a tool to achieve her own ends. It became clear that Emily's motive was never love, but power. The power to control the Peterson family, take over the flower shop business, and rid herself of the marriage that had kept her trapped in a life of duty and routine. George, once a man of integrity, had been reduced to a pawn in her calculated plan, falling so deeply into sin that he could no longer find a way out. As the trial continued, the emotional toll on the Peterson family became increasingly visible. Lily, now 17, and Max, 13, were forced to endure the painful details of their father's murder while also grappling with their mother's betrayal. Lily, who had always admired her mother's strength, was left heartbroken, struggling to reconcile the woman who raised her with the cold manipulator described in court. Max, still so young, could barely comprehend how his entire world had collapsed. The loss of his father and the destruction of his family weighed heavily on him. Both children were left to navigate the shame and confusion that followed them everywhere they went. On October 10, 2015, the verdict was delivered. The jury, after hearing all the details of the case, found Emily guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, a decision that brought some closure to the community but left many unanswered questions. George, although spared from a life sentence, faced his own punishment. He was convicted of lesser charges, but his reputation was irreparably damaged, and his guilt would haunt him for the rest of his life. The social circles where he had once been respected no longer welcomed him, and his family ties were shattered beyond repair. In the aftermath of the trial, the Peterson family was left in ruins. The flower shop business, once a source of pride, struggled to survive. Without Thomas's leadership and with George's involvement in the scandal, Many customers abandoned them, and the community's trust in the family was broken. Lily and Max were left to navigate life without the guidance of their parents, both of whom were lost to them in different ways. Lily, standing on the brink of adulthood, bore the family's shame on her shoulders. She tried to stay strong for Max, but the trauma of losing both parents, one to murder and the other to the justice system, took a heavy toll. She often reflected on the days before everything fell apart, wondering how her mother had managed to hide such darkness beneath their seemingly perfect life. Max, still so young, struggled to find his place in a world where both his parents had betrayed him. The emotional scars left by the trial would follow him and his sister for the rest of their lives. As the dust settled on the trial, the community remained divided. Some viewed George as a man who had been led astray, a victim of Emily's manipulation. Others believed that he too bore responsibility for the tragedy, unable to escape the consequences of his own actions. But the most lingering question was, what had truly driven Emily to orchestrate such a horrific act? Was it simply a desire for freedom, or was there something deeper? A hunger for power and control, buried beneath her facade of devotion and duty? The unraveling of Emily's affair and her cold manipulation of George left an indelible mark on the community. It served as a grim reminder that even the most outwardly perfect lives could hide unimaginable darkness. The betrayal, the murder, and the trial left the neighborhood grappling with the haunting truth that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes those we trust the most are the ones capable of causing the greatest harm.
In this episode, we explore the case of a newlywed husband who disappeared on his honeymoon. The shocking truth behind his disappearance revealed a web of deception, secret affairs, and ultimately murder. Victor Ruiz was a 45-year-old renowned surgeon living in Santa Cruz, California, known for his dedication to his career and sharp mind. He had built a prestigious reputation in the medical field. Despite his accomplishments, Victor had spent most of his life under the firm control of his mother, Isabella Ruiz. After years of bachelorhood, Victor's life took an unexpected turn when he met Lina Castillo, a 32-year-old fitness trainer from Aspen, Colorado. Victor and Lina met at a high-end gym in Los Angeles, where she worked as a personal trainer and he was a client. Lina's warm smile and energetic personality drew him in, and they quickly struck up a conversation that extended far beyond a typical workout session. Her positive attitude and passion for fitness intrigued him, and soon they were exchanging stories over coffee. What began as casual conversations turned into a deep connection. Over the next few months, their relationship flourished. Victor was charmed by Lina's lively spirit, while Lina admired Victor's calmness and stability. They spent their weekends hiking along the scenic coast of Santa Cruz and exploring local art galleries. Lina even managed to win over Victor's strong-willed mother, Isabella, who surprisingly approved of their relationship despite her usual controlling nature. However, their relationship was far from simple. Lina's need for attention from Victor was obvious, but so was her unusual closeness to Isabella. Friends often remarked on how much time Lina spent with Victor's mother, sometimes giving her more attention than Victor himself. This raised eyebrows, with people wondering if Lina was trying to win over Isabella or if there was something more beneath the surface. Lina often invited Isabella to join them on outings, and the two shared private jokes that occasionally left Victor feeling uneasy. Despite these odd dynamics, Victor believed he had finally found happiness. He proposed to Lina in the spring of 2013, and they swiftly planned a wedding, eager to start their lives together. The couple married just weeks before their honeymoon on Catalina Island, California, where they hoped to unwind and celebrate their new life. But just days into the honeymoon, tragedy struck. Victor's vision of a perfect marriage and a peaceful escape by the ocean came crashing down. He mysteriously vanished from the resort one night, and it wouldn't be long before his body was discovered. For a man who had spent his life in control of his destiny, the final moments of Victor Ruiz's life would be anything but. On June 9, 2013, the sun rose over Catalina Island, a favorite honeymoon destination known for its quiet beaches and tranquil atmosphere. As the day began, Lina Castillo awoke in their hotel suite at the seaside resort, eager to start another day of relaxation with her new husband, Victor. But when she turned to the other side of the bed, she realized he was gone. At first, Lina thought nothing of it. She assumed Victor had gone for an early morning walk or headed to the resort cafe for breakfast. However, as the hours passed with no sign of him, her concerns started to grow. After searching the resort and asking staff if anyone had seen him, Lina finally approached the front desk to report Victor missing. The staff immediately contacted the local authorities, and officers from the Catalina Island Police arrived at the resort around 10:30 a.m. Lina described Victor as a responsible man who had no history of wandering off or making sudden changes to plans. She was certain something had gone wrong. The police began their search by combing through the resort and nearby beaches, trails, and other surrounding areas. As the hours turned into days, their efforts continued, but there was no trace of Victor. By June 12th, the island's mood had shifted from one of relaxation to tension. The search intensified as both the police and local community grew increasingly worried, and Lena's worry turned into despair. Then, on the morning of June 14th, a disturbing discovery was made. A local photographer named Frank Baxter came across the grisly scene while walking along a secluded beach around 6:30 a.m., hoping to capture the early light. The area was far from the bustling parts of the island frequented by tourists. As Frank neared the shoreline, something in the water caught his eye. At first, he thought it was debris or a large object tangled in the seaweed, but as he got closer, the truth became clear. It was a body. Horrified, Frank quickly dialed 911, his hands shaking as he described what he had found to the operator. Within minutes, the police were on the scene, sealing off the area from onlookers and tourists. Victor Ruiz's body was found face down in the shallow water, his clothes soaked through, with no immediate signs of struggle. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic accident, possibly a drowning. However, as the investigators examined the scene, they noticed something was off. Faint bruises marked Victor's neck, barely visible but suspicious. His body was bloated, indicating that he had been in the water for several hours, but his shoes remained on, which struck investigators as odd. People don't typically go swimming fully dressed. Victor's body was sent to the county morgue for a detailed examination, but by that time, it was clear this was no ordinary drowning. Something far more sinister had taken place on this quiet island retreat. When the Catalina Island Police Department arrived at the scene of Victor Ruiz's body on June 14, 2013, it was evident to Detective Angela Martinez, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp instincts, that this wouldn't be an easy case. While the initial call hinted at a possible accidental drowning, the scene told a much different story. The area where Victor was found was remote, far from the main tourist spots like Avalon Beach, where honeymooners and families usually gathered. The sand around his body was undisturbed, and there were no signs of a struggle or footprints leading to or from the water. Yet, Victor's body was fully dressed, including his shoes, which struck the investigators as strange. People don't typically go swimming with their shoes on. Detective Martinez crouched next to the body, noticing faint bruises around Victor's neck. They were subtle, almost concealed by the salt water that had soaked his skin, but enough to raise suspicion. Something about the scene seemed staged. Nearby, Officer Jake Reynolds, a young officer new to the department, worked alongside Martinez, carefully documenting the area with photographs and notes. An autopsy was quickly arranged, but the early signs all pointed to foul play. The body's condition, bloated from hours in the water, made it difficult to identify any obvious trauma. However, the bruising, along with Victor's fully dressed state, left little doubt in Detective Martinez's mind that this was no accident. The beach remained eerily silent that morning as the investigation team worked methodically. They set up perimeter tape and combed the shoreline for clues, searching for anything out of place, whether it was clothing, footprints, or personal belongings that could offer clues. Their tools included metal detectors, forensic kits, and even drones to scan the surrounding area from above. Detective Martinez took charge, directing her team to treat the case as a potential homicide. Meanwhile, officers back at the resort questioned staff and guests, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything strange the night before. Hotel security footage was also reviewed to piece together Victor's final movements. As the investigation progressed, it became more and more clear that Victor hadn't simply wandered off for a midnight swim. He had been drugged, dragged to the water, and left to drown, the ocean used as a cover-up for a much darker crime. The first person the police turned to was Lena Castillo, Victor's wife of just a few weeks. Lena, 32, was from Aspen, Colorado, and had met Victor less than a year before their whirlwind wedding. Before marrying Victor, Lena had worked as a fitness trainer at a luxury gym in Los Angeles. On the surface, she seemed like a cheerful, outgoing woman with a passion for health and wellness, but those who knew her well hinted at a more complex side. Manipulative, secretive, and always calculated. On the morning of June 14, 2013, just hours after Victor's body was found, Lena was brought in for question. Detectives described her demeanor as calm but distant. She wore a large sun hat and sunglasses, refusing to remove them even during the interview. Lena explained that she had woken up that morning to find her husband missing. Initially, she assumed he had gone for an early morning swim, as he had done a few times since they arrived at the Catalina Island Resort. But when the hours went by and Victor didn't return, she became worried and called the police. During the interrogation, Lena's story was straightforward, but her behavior raised eyebrows. She spoke calmly, almost too calmly, about her missing husband as if talking about a stranger. When detectives asked her about their relationship,
She described Victor as a good man but was vague when questioned about their intimacy during the honeymoon. Detective Angela Martinez, who led the questioning, noticed Lena's lack of emotion. She wasn't behaving like someone who had just lost her husband, Martinez later noted. There was no real sadness, no tears, just a cold detachment that didn't sit right. As the police dug deeper into Lena's background, more troubling details came to light. She had a history of financial issues, with several maxed-out credit cards and unpaid debts. Investigators also discovered that Lena had formed an unusually close bond with Victor's mother, Isabella Ruiz, who had surprisingly joined them on their honeymoon, a detail that struck many as odd. The police began to suspect that Lena might have had a motive for murder. Victor, a wealthy surgeon, had recently amended his will to make Lena the primary beneficiary. If Victor were out of the picture, Lena stood to inherit a substantial fortune. Despite her calm appearance, the police knew they had to dig deeper to understand Lena's true intentions. The second person of interest in Victor Ruiz's death was Amy Liu, a 21-year-old yoga instructor who worked at the beachfront resort where Victor and Lena were staying. Amy was originally from Los Angeles but had moved to Catalina Island to save money for college, where she planned to study kinesiology. Young and carefree, Amy seemed to have a bright future. At least that's what everyone thought. The police soon uncovered that Amy had been involved in a passionate affair with Lena during the Ruiz honeymoon. Several resort employees reported seeing the two women sneaking away together, often while Victor was either asleep or out for a walk. This wasn't just a casual fling. Investigators described Amy as completely under Lena's spell, admitting to having sex with her numerous times after Victor's disappearance, and even after his body was found. Lena, known for her charming but manipulative nature, had easily pulled Amy into her web of deception. On June 22, 2013, Amy was brought in for questioning. Unlike Lena, Amy was visibly shaken and anxious during the interrogation. She confessed to the affair almost immediately but maintained that she had nothing to do with Victor's death. Amy told police that she and Lena had been seeing each other since the couple's arrival on the island, but she insisted she was unaware of any plan to harm Victor. Detective Angela Martinez noted Amy's emotional state, believing that Amy was scared and confused, but not trying to conceal anything about the affair. To the police, Amy seemed more like a pawn in Lena's game than anything else. Amy recounted how Lena had told her that her marriage to Victor was purely a business arrangement and that while she didn't love Victor, she did love his mother, Isabella Ruiz. Lena had even hinted at running away together to the California coast for endless freedom, but Amy never imagined things would go this far. Naive and caught up in the whirlwind of her first romantic relationship with another woman, Amy struggled to comprehend the reality of the situation. Despite her claims of innocence, the police viewed Amy as a person of interest. They were suspicious of her involvement with Lena and wondered whether she had played a role in a larger plan to get rid of Victor. Amy's alibi was shaky. She claimed she had been working at the yoga studio the night Victor disappeared, but her shifts were irregular, and there were no clear records to confirm her whereabouts during the crucial hour. While Amy insisted she had nothing to do with the murder, her involvement with Lena couldn't be ignored. Investigators dug deeper into the young yoga instructor's life, trying to determine just how deeply she had been pulled into Lena's deadly scheme. The investigation took a shocking turn on June 24, 2013, when new evidence came to light. The day started off sunny and warm, typical for Catalina Island in late June. The investigation had stalled until a hotel receptionist, Natalie Brown, came forward with a startling story. Natalie, who had worked at the resort for years, told police she had overheard something disturbing just days before Victor Ruiz's body was found. On the night of June 10, Natalie was working the night shift when she heard strange noises coming from the Ruiz suite. At first, she assumed it was just the couple, but what she heard next made her stop. She distinctly heard two women's voices, one of them being Lena's, clearly engaged in what sounded like rough sex. But what was more alarming, Victor was still in the room, asleep. Natalie explained that she had hesitated to speak up earlier due to her desire to avoid any complications, especially given her personal situation. However, after learning about Victor's death, she felt she had to come forward. When pressed for more details, Natalie confirmed that the other woman she heard was none other than Victor's elderly mother, Isabella Ruiz. This revelation stunned the investigators. They had already confirmed Lena's infidelity, but the fact that she was involved in a sexual relationship with her own mother-in-law was a twist they hadn't anticipated. It completely changed their understanding of the events leading up to Victor's death. Detective Angela Martinez was the first to piece together the implications of Natalie's account. Suddenly, everything clicked into place, and Martinez considered the possibility that Lena and Isabella were using Victor as a cover for their affair. And when that wasn't enough, they plotted to eliminate him. With this new information, the police revisited the crime scene and started digging deeper into the relationship between Lena and Isabella. It wasn't long before more evidence surfaced. Hotel staff recalled frequently seeing the two women together, often leaving Victor behind to have secret encounters in secluded areas of the resort. Other witnesses came forward, describing the strange dynamic between the newlyweds and Isabella. Investigators now believed that Lena and Isabella had been planning Victor's murder for some time. The discovery of their affair added a new layer to their motive. It became clear that Victor had become a barrier to their twisted relationship, an obstacle that needed to be removed. Armed with this new evidence, the police were one step closer to solving the mystery of Victor Ruiz's death. With the new information provided by the hotel receptionist,
detectives shifted their attention to Isabella Ruiz, Victor's 78-year-old mother. Up until this point, Isabella had been viewed as a grieving, long-widowed mother, but her secret relationship with Lena raised serious doubts about her involvement in her son's murder. Isabella was known in Santa Cruz as a strong-willed, wealthy widow with a commanding personality. Even at her advanced age, she kept a tight grip on her son's life and finances, dictating everything from his social engagements to his diet. She was the type of woman who dressed impeccably in brands like Chanel and Hermes and insisted on driving her black Cadillac. Despite suffering from macular degeneration, she had always expected unwavering loyalty from Victor but had been unusually approving of his marriage to Lena. Detectives invited Isabella Ruiz to the station for a formal interview on June 25, 2013. At first, Isabella appeared calm and composed, playing the role of a heartbroken mother. She expressed disbelief that anyone would suspect her or Lena of wrongdoing. "My son was my precious boy," she said, her voice trembling as she dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "I would never harm my darling Victor." But when detectives confronted her with the receptionist's testimony and the growing evidence of her secret affair with Lena, Isabella's demeanor shifted. The frail, grieving mother was gone. In her place stood a defensive and angry woman, accusing the police of trying to destroy her family. "This is absurd. You're dragging my name through the mud based on gossip from a hotel worker," she snapped. Despite her protests, detectives noticed cracks in Isabella's story. She couldn't explain why she and Lena had been spending so much time alone together during the honeymoon, or why they had been overheard in intimate situations that sounded unmistakably sexual. The carefully constructed image of the innocent mother-in-law began to crumble under the pressure of the investigation. By this point, detectives had a strong theory. Isabella and Lena had conspired to murder Victor so they could continue their illicit relationship without him in the way. Isabella's possessiveness over both her son and her lover was a driving force. She couldn't stand the idea of losing Lena, especially to someone as important as her own son. Though Isabella denied any involvement, the police were becoming more certain they were closing in on the truth. Her evasive responses and the mounting evidence only deepened their suspicions. The once powerful matriarch now found herself at the center of a scandal she had worked hard to keep hidden. By June 28, 2013, the investigation reached a tipping point. Detectives had uncovered enough evidence to directly connect Isabella Ruiz to her son's murder. The shocking revelation of her affair with Lena, combined with the testimony of the receptionist, who overheard the two women having sex in the same room as Victor while he slept, painted a disturbing picture. The grieving mother had now become the prime suspect, and investigators believed she played an active role in Victor's death. Isabella Ruiz, 78, was known for her manipulative nature. She orchestrated every aspect of his existence, from his finances to his relationships. However, her relationship with Lena Castillo, her daughter-in-law, was even more troubling. It extended beyond familial bounds into a secret, sordid affair that ultimately led the two women to plot Victor's demise. On the night of the murder, Isabella, who possessed the villainous mind of a cartoon supervillain, slipped sleeping pills into Victor's drink. Meanwhile, Lena distracted him with sex. Once Victor was unconscious, Isabella and Lena dragged his body to the beach, staging his death to look like a tragic drowning accident. They hoped the ocean currents would erase any trace of their involvement, but forensic experts soon uncovered bruises on Victor's neck and traces of sedatives in his system. The police arrested Isabella Ruiz at her Santa Cruz estate. It was a quiet afternoon, and she was enjoying her daily cup of tea on her front porch when officers arrived. She was taken into custody without a fight and maintained her innocence, showing little emotion as the handcuffs clicked into place, seemingly expecting the arrest all along. Lena Castillo was also arrested, but further investigation revealed that Isabella had masterminded the entire plan, with Lena deeply under her influence. The news of Isabella's arrest shocked Victor's family and friends. Those who once admired her for her strength and sharp wit were now horrified by the truth. The trial of Isabella Ruiz began in November 2014 and quickly became one of the most talked about cases among true crime enthusiasts in California. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney James O'Connor, argued that Isabella had killed her own son to preserve her secret affair with Lena. O'Connor used the shocking details of the mother-daughter-in-law relationship to paint Isabella as a manipulative and cold-hearted killer. The defense, led by high-profile attorney Mark Randall, tried to portray Isabella Ruiz as a frail old woman who could not possibly have orchestrated such a crime. Randall painted Lina Castillo as the true mastermind, claiming that Isabella had been manipulated into covering up for her daughter-in-law. However, Isabella's stern demeanor on the stand did little to win the jury's sympathy, and they were clearly disturbed by the sordid details of the case. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury took just 2 hours to reach a verdict. Isabella Ruiz was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lina Castillo, though charged as an accessory to murder, received a lighter sentence of 25 years after cooperating with investigators. The verdict brought some relief to Victor's family, but the damage left behind by the shocking betrayal would never fully heal. Many felt that justice had been served, but Victor's tragic death and the circumstances surrounding it left a dark cloud over the Ruiz family for years to come. After the trial, life changed drastically for everyone involved. Isabella Ruiz, the mother convicted of murdering her son, was sent to a state prison in California. Despite her sharp wit and strong personality, life behind bars proved challenging. Isabella tried to maintain her dignity, but the isolation and stigma of her crime weighed heavily on her. In prison, she was often the target of gossip and disdain from other inmates. Over the years, Isabella's health began to decline, and in 2021 she contracted COVID-19 during a surge in cases. Despite efforts to treat her, she passed away alone in a prison hospital. News of her death made headlines, with some former friends and family expressing mixed feelings about her fate. Lina Castillo, Victor's widow, faced a different kind of consequence after her reduced sentence of 25 years. She served her time in a women's correctional facility, often reminiscing about her life before the murder. During her incarceration, she sought therapy to deal with her feelings of guilt and confusion about her relationships. Lina maintained her innocence regarding the actual murder but acknowledged her role in the events that unfolded. Amy Liu, the young yoga instructor who had become entangled in the scandal, also faced her own struggles. Though Amy was never charged with any crime, the fallout from the trial affected her reputation. She continued to work at the resort for a few years after the events, but the whispers of the affair haunted her. In search of a fresh start, Amy eventually moved to Los Angeles, California, where she enrolled in college.
Hello everyone. Today we bring to light a distressing story from Gwalior, India, where challenges for women persist beneath the surface of everyday life. This episode focuses on a harrowing incident from 2009 in Gwalior, telling the tale of Anya, a village girl coerced into matrimony with a man decades her senior. Rajan, a well-established local businessman. Regarded merely as an object, Anya suffered both physical and psychological abuse. Compelled to cater to powerful local figures to further Rajan's interests, Anya endured a life of torment but ultimately chose to challenge her oppressors. Her ordeal transcends a mere criminal case, echoing the silent pleas of countless other women enduring similar fates. We will delve into the specifics of this case to shed light on the severe repercussions Anya faced in her quest for autonomy. Remember to subscribe to the channel to keep up with more compelling stories. Born in 1987 in a modest village near Gwalior, Anya's family scraped by on a meager livelihood, the typical lot for working-class families in secluded rural India. As one of 6 children, Anya witnessed the relentless struggle of her parents, laboring on unyielding land. Despite her academic promise and aspirations for higher education, economic hardships curtailed her schooling post-high school. Her responsibilities soon expanded beyond the classroom, assisting her mother on their small farm and caring for her younger siblings, thus foregoing her personal ambitions to help sustain her family. Anya was known for her gentle demeanor and striking features: dark, healthy skin, large expressive eyes, and a warm smile. Her unassuming beauty and industrious nature won her many admirers in her village, yet she maintained a modest, low-profile life. Her aspirations were simple: a tranquil life, further education, and a stable job to support her family. However, her life's path veered drastically when she met Rajan, an influential local businessman born in 1962 in the affluent surroundings of Varanasi, a city renowned for its historic wealth and cultural depth. Rajan grew up in opulence, born to a prominent family that owned extensive land and was deeply entwined with the real estate sector. His family's long-standing connections with government officials laid a strong foundation for their fortune. Raised with a focus on dominance rather than scholarship, Rajan eschewed academic pursuits in favor of expanding his inherited wealth, quickly establishing himself as a formidable figure in Varanasi's business circles. His ventures ranged from real estate to more dubious enterprises such as loan sharking, leveraging his strategic acumen and vast network. Rajan was manipulative, using his wealth and influence without scruple to bend relationships to his will. Known for his extravagant lifestyle and polygamous tendencies, he never shied away from adding to his retinue of wives, regardless of the domestic discord it sowed. Aditi, his first wife, wielded considerable influence over the household, managing the internal power dynamics and often instigating familial strife. To Rajan, women were merely instruments to flaunt his status and facilitate his dealings, even forcing them into degrading liaisons with high-ranking officials to fortify his social and political ties. On June 8, 2009, while passing through a quaint village near Gwalior, Rajan, already married to 3 women, caught sight of Anya, whose understated beauty and youthful innocence captivated him. Despite his existing marital commitments, he was drawn to her and promptly proposed marriage, using wealth to sway her financially struggling family. Overwhelmed by debts and a challenging life, her family saw Rajan's proposal as a means to alleviate their financial distress. This union, though ostensibly a marriage, was for them a desperate financial reprieve. Yet, Anya could not bear the thought of marrying a man 25 years her senior, with whom she shared no emotional bond. In a bid for freedom, she attempted to flee only to be caught. Her father, pressured by economic hardships, inflicted a harsh beating on her. Overcome with fear and resentment yet cornered by her grim reality, Anya was compelled to proceed with the marriage. Her wedding night at Rajan's residence was nothing short of a nightmare. Far from experiencing the tender beginnings of marital life, she was subjected to cruel abuse. Rajan, displaying his brutal nature, did not regard her as his partner but as an object to fulfill his depraved cravings. His abusive actions that night were just the beginning of her torment. Anya also had to navigate the hostility of Rajan's other wives, who, while empathetic to her plight, indoctrinated her into the harsh realities of their household. This initiation into a life of subservience under Rajan's dominance marked the start of her enduring struggle within a home ruled by manipulation and cruelty. Among the wives, the eldest, Aditi, wielded the most power and often brutalized the others to affirm her dominance. Aditi viewed Anya as a threat and treated her with particular cruelty, ensuring her life within Rajan's walls was a living nightmare. Daily, Anya faced not only Rajan's wrath but also that of his other wives, enduring continual abuse merely to survive another day. In this household devoid of love, respect, or compassion, she became nothing more than an instrument to appease Rajan and comply with the demands of those he sought to impress, living a life tantamount to slavery. Anya's existence bore no semblance to that of a wife or even a concubine. Instead, she was relegated to the role of a menial laborer, burdened with relentless chores from dawn till dusk, cleaning, cooking, and washing with no respite. The days were grueling, but the nights brought horrors that were far worse, as she was subjected to Rajan's sadistic tortures, not as his spouse but as an object to satisfy his perverse whims. Rajan's treatment of Anya was merciless, often forcing her into degrading acts that stripped her of dignity and humanity. His tyrannical and sadistic nature reduced her to less than a servant in their intimate moments, enduring unimaginable cruelty. Beyond physical abuse, Rajan compelled his wives to entertain influential figures, further exploiting them to cement his lucrative connections. For those accustomed to his brutality, this was merely another grim facet of their reality, a survival mechanism in the oppressive confines of their home. However, for Anya, each of these forced encounters was a profound violation, an assault on her dignity that sunk her deeper into despair. The first of these dire situations occurred on October 12, 2009, when Rajan made her entertain a notorious politician critical to his network. That night, the politician's actions were even more vicious than Rajan's, treating Anya not just as a plaything but also compelling her to perform acts that deeply scarred her psyche. These horrifying experiences were not just traumatic events but enduring scars on her spirit, diminishing her sense of self-worth with each passing ordeal. On January 2, 2009, as New Year festivities filled the air, Anya seized the moment to flee the torment she endured under Rajan's roof. With the cover of celebration around her, she stealthily left his house and made her way to Mumbai, seeking anonymity in the bustling metropolis to begin anew. In Mumbai, Anya secured employment in a modest factory, a challenging yet liberating departure from the oppressive environment she had left behind. Here, she embraced a quiet existence, always vigilant and cautious to avoid drawing attention to herself, haunted yet driven by the shadows of her past life. These months represented a brief period of cherished liberty, the kind Anya had longed for, even though she was aware that Rajan's extensive reach might someday reclaim her. Indeed, after 3 months, leveraging his influential connections, Rajan discovered Anya at her workplace. Enraged, he publicly assaulted her, disregarding her distress and the shocked witnesses around them. Against her pleas, he dragged her back to his home where he confined her in a solitary room as punishment. For a week, she was left in seclusion, surrounded by darkness and consumed by fear, which broke her spirit further. During this grim period of isolation, Anya realized that resistance would only prolong her suffering. Resigned to her fate, she began to adjust her demeanor, painstakingly presenting herself as compliant and devoted in an effort to mitigate further abuse. Her efforts to conform gradually convinced Rajan of her submission, satisfying his ego and leading him to believe she had fully accepted her subservient role. However, beneath her outward compliance, Anya harbored a deep-seated resolve to escape. She concealed her growing resentment and the pain of her subjugation, biding her time for a final act of liberation. On a fateful evening, as Rajan unsuspectingly entered her room to spend the night, Anya saw her chance. As he drifted to sleep, she silently retrieved a concealed knife, unleashing years of suppressed agony and fury with multiple forceful stabs. These decisive actions culminated in the demise of the man who had made her existence unbearable. Instead of fleeing, Anya remained in the room, staring down at Rajan's lifeless form with a mix of exhaustion and manic relief, her laughter resounding through the corridors as a grim testament to her endured horrors. She collapsed, spent yet unburdened, soon after which the police arrived and apprehended her on charges of murder. At the station, her immediate portrayal was that of a calculated murderer, with little regard for the complex and painful motives behind her actions. Just as her plight seemed irrevocable, an intrepid journalist took interest in her case, initiating a deeper probe into her circumstances. This reporter secured an interview with Anya, allowing her to share her narrative publicly, from the coerced marriage and sustained abuse to the debasing demands of Rajan and his associates, and the dire extremities that compelled her actions. The ensuing article, laden with the raw and poignant details of Anya's ordeal, quickly gained traction on major news platforms, sparking widespread public outrage and empathy. This public outcry prompted a re-evaluation of her case, leading to an intervention by the Central Bureau of Investigation. The CBI's thorough investigation into the testimonies of Anya and other corroborative sources illuminated the true extent of her suffering, reshaping her image from a mere perpetrator to a victim of severe violence and systemic oppression. Anya's trial unfolded in August 2009 at the Central Court in New Delhi, India, drawing significant attention from the public, media, and human rights organizations. The gripping narrative of Anya, who became a perpetrator under duress of violence and coercion, captivated national interest. Over the course of the 10-day trial, both the prosecution and the defense meticulously laid out the context of Anya's drastic measures. The defense strenuously highlighted her dual role as a victim ensnared within a harsh societal structure that often diminishes women's rights and autonomy. Despite a measure of judicial empathy for Anya's dire circumstances, the gravity of her actions dictated a stern response from the court. Ultimately, she was handed a 14-year sentence, a decision that, while harsh, was deemed lenient by some, given the extenuating conditions of her sustained abuse and exploitation. The proceedings also cast light on systemic abuses of power, including misconduct by government officials who exploited their authority at the expense of individuals like Anya. The trial led to public censure and disciplinary actions against several implicated officials, illustrating the broader implications of Anya's ordeal. Her story transcends personal tragedy, touching on deeper societal issues of injustice and the systemic mistreatment that often goes unchallenged. As this case concludes, Anya's narrative stands as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for human rights and the imperative to combat all forms of violence against women. What are your thoughts on the outcome? Does a 14-year sentence adequately reflect the complex interplay of victimization and accountability in Anya's case? Or should there have been greater leniency considering her circumstances? Join the discussion in the comments below.
Wednesday morning, October 25, 2023, a tragedy unfolded in Dallas, Texas when the lifeless body of a woman was found abandoned on the roadside. The victim had gunshot wounds on the chest, and it seemed she was shot on the scene the previous day. When the police arrived, they discovered that the body belonged to Dishai Stevenson, a 34-year-old businesswoman, wife, and mother. The previous night, she had been with her husband, Michael Smith, but by morning, she was on the roadside dead. The most unsettling part of the story is that Michael, her husband, was the last person to see her alive. This shocking turn of events would later be linked to mounting tension between the couple and the shocking discovery of the main reason an innocent woman was murdered. This is the tragic story of Dishai Stevenson, a woman whose life ended too soon. Before we go further into the events that transpired, we would like to offer our condolences to her loved ones, especially her teenage daughter, who must now face a life without her mother. Also, We would like to take this crime case as a close reminder to everyone to recognize warning signs in relationships. The story takes us to Dallas, Texas, a city situated in the southern United States, in North Texas. Unfortunately, it has a relatively high crime rate, with around 46 crimes per 1,000 residents, which is almost double the state average of around 27 crimes per 1,000 people. This could also be because Dallas is a very large city. Born on November 16, 1988, Dishai Stevenson was the epitome of a self-made woman. She had built a life for herself in Dallas, where she ran multiple successful businesses. Dishai had a boutique called Shea Money Purses and More LLC, where she sold a variety of fashion items like male and female clothing, purses, hats, lashes, and more. She also operated a tax preparation service, helping clients file tax refunds, which can be a good source of income in the United States. Dishai's drive for financial independence was very impressive, and she knew this. In fact, her Facebook nickname is listed as Money Mac Dishai, and on Instagram, it's Shea Money. Dishai was not shy to promote her business or tell the world that she was a thriving businesswoman. Because she was a hard worker, her businesses grew. She had just acquired a space in May 2022 that she had hoped would become her long-term shop. She thanked God for being able to get her store and was congratulated by friends. Dishai was also very close with her family and friends. She enjoyed cooking and having family gatherings. She wasn't just passionate about her business ventures. She also loved helping people, which made her loved by those who worked with and around her. She was generous with her time, love, and money, especially toward her family and friends. Now, let's talk about her personal life. Dishai's world revolved around her 16-year-old daughter, Maya, whom she showered with love and care. She was married to her husband, Michael, but Maya was from a former relationship. Dishai loved her husband, but she was also a doting mother who made sure her daughter had everything she needed, even giving her a new car for her 16th birthday, which was a symbol of her hard work and the life she could build. It was clear that family was important to Dishai because she also posted videos of her nieces, nephews, and even her goddaughter to wish them a happy birthday. She was also the primary caretaker for her mother, who had suffered a stroke and was left partially paralyzed. Balancing her entrepreneurial ventures with her caregiving responsibilities, Dishai's life was a constant juggle, but she did it with grace, always with a smile on her face. Despite her successful and demanding life, Dishai still found time to be a life-of-the-party type of person. She had a larger-than-life personality, always ensuring that everyone around her felt good. Even with all the good things happening in Dishai's life, her relationship with Michael Smith, her husband, would take a drastic turn. Michael Smith, 39 years old, had been a significant part of Dishai's life for years. To those looking in from the outside, he seemed quiet and easygoing, which appeared to be a fitting match for Dishai's energetic personality. They had been in a relationship for a long time, experiencing the usual ups and downs of couples. However, their relationship was more complex than it appeared on the surface. Dishai had maintained a long-distance relationship with Michael while he was incarcerated. Her loyalty to him never wavered during his time in prison, which began in 2016. Throughout his incarceration, she visited him, called him, and remained faithful, waiting for him to come home. This unwavering support was a testament to Dishai's loving and empathetic nature. When Michael was released from prison on May 17, 2021, Dishai wanted to ensure he felt appreciated and loved after missing out on so much. She planned a significant surprise for his return, a wedding. Just a week after his release, they tied the knot on May 24, 2021, at the courthouse. Later, on September 9, 2022, Dishai hosted an elaborate wedding celebration for them, taking care of everything from the rings to the entire ceremony. Given Michael's recent release from prison, Dishai became the sole financial provider in their relationship. Despite this potentially awkward situation, she didn't seem to mind. In an Instagram post, Dishai expressed her deep love for Michael, writing, "I already married the love of my life on May 24, 2021. I really prayed and cried out to God to send me somebody to love me for the real me. God sent me a king. My husband is so faithful to me. He's not running around making me look stupid. My husband is one of a kind. Good, bad, happy, or sad. That's my husband. I cry so much before. I never felt this kind of love before. It's scary because he treats me like a queen. He shows me what love really means. I married a man, not a little boy." Deshai's love for Michael was expressed in extraordinary ways. She supported him financially, emotionally, and in every aspect she could. To her, she had married a king who loved her and treated her like a queen. She lavished him with love, funding extravagant vacations and throwing lavish birthday parties where she gifted him expensive presents like a diamond ring and even $10,000 in cash. Deshai consistently went the extra mile for Michael, handling all financial and planning aspects of their life together.
Their marriage appeared to be a celebration of their bond, seemingly kept alive by Deshai's financial and emotional investments.
However, beneath this surface of apparent marital bliss, there were troubling signs that would later come to light. Michael's background starkly contrasted with Deshai's. Growing up in a challenging environment, he had to fend for himself from an early age. Unlike Deshai's supportive family dynamic, Michael's history was marred by drug abuse and a stint in prison, which put him significantly behind his peers in terms of financial stability and social status. As Deshai's businesses flourished and her reputation as a successful entrepreneur grew, Michael's resentment and jealousy intensified. This dynamic is not uncommon in relationships where there's a significant disparity in career success between partners. Men, in particular, may experience feelings of inadequacy, threats to their masculinity, and fears about changing relationship dynamics when their female partners outperform them professionally too. Traditional gender roles and societal expectations often exacerbate these feelings, leading men to question their value and role in the relationship. Research has shown that economic distress and perceived financial strain can significantly increase the risk of intimate partner violence too. In couples experiencing high levels of subjective financial strain, the likelihood of intimate partner violence rises to 9.5%, compared to 2.7% in couples with low levels of financial strain.
Who overthinks everything? Who showers less? Who is always eating? Who has a nicer butt? Who is more possessive? Who drools more? Who is a better driver?
Despite noticing subtle changes in the relationship, friends and family failed to grasp the full severity of the situation. Deshai, ever loyal, continued to lavish attention and gifts on Michael, buying matching clothes and covering all expenses in an attempt to show her love and support. However, Michael's jealousy extended beyond Deshai's professional success. He became increasingly possessive and controlling, a pattern that worsened as his drug addiction resurfaced. The once loving relationship became fraught with tension and red flags. More frequent arguments and fights began to take their toll on Deshai, the man she had sacrificed everything for. The one she believed would be her source of peace had transformed into someone unrecognizable. Tragically, this same person would ultimately become her murderer. On October 21, 2023, Deshai Stevenson called her sister Jasmine to wish Jasmine's son a happy birthday. During their conversation, Deshai made a chilling statement. "Sister, I feel like I'm going to die." Jasmine, taken aback, brushed it off at the time, not realizing the gravity of her sister's words. Deshai had promised to bring a gift for her nephew but never showed up.
She called me, she wished me happy birthday. He was like, normal, whatever. We was laughing, joking. And then she just said, "Sister, I feel like I'm finna die."
On October 24, 2023, Deshai's 16-year-old daughter became concerned when she couldn't reach her mother. This was highly unusual, as Deshai was known for always being in touch with her daughter and for her role as a caregiver to her partially paralyzed mother. The family's concern grew as they began searching for Deshai. When the family contacted Michael Smith, Deshay's husband, he denied knowing her whereabouts. They tracked Deshay's car to the Pleasant Village apartments, where Michael's father lived. Jasmine Stevenson and their cousin, Nita, noticed a large handprint on the driver's window of Deshay's car, raising suspicions. Shortly after, they learned from a community blog about a woman found shot to death nearby. Upon arriving at the scene, officers confirmed their worst fears. The police investigation quickly uncovered disturbing evidence. In Michael's car, they found red bodily fluids, a bullet casing, and a single sandal matching what Deshay had last been seen wearing. Surveillance footage showed both Deshay and Michael arriving separately at the apartment complex, with Deshay then getting into Michael's car. A disturbance was observed inside the vehicle. Deshay's body was discovered on the morning of October 25, 2023, on the side of a road in Dallas, Texas. She had been shot at close range in the chest. As news of Deshay's death spread, law enforcement launched a manhunt for Michael. They tracked him to his home, where they found multiple firearms, and later apprehended him at a nearby barbershop. Michael claimed he had been under the influence of PCP at the time of the shooting. Michael Smith, 39, was arrested and charged with murder. He remains in custody with a bond set at $1 million. The case is currently set for a jury trial, with Smith having been indicted by a grand jury for murder. This tragic event has left Deshay's family, especially her 16-year-old daughter, devastated and searching for answers. Jasmine Stevenson expressed the family's pain, asking, "Why would you take my sister from us?"
She did everything. My sister did everything for him. It was nothing he couldn't ask her for. She did everything. She did everything in her power to show him that she...
The investigation into Deshay Stevenson's murder continues as authorities piece together the tragic final moments of her life. Michael Smith remains in custody, held on a $1 million bond. If he cannot pay this substantial amount, he will remain in jail until his court date is set and he is sentenced. Deshay's family is left heartbroken, struggling to comprehend the senseless violence that took their loved one. Her 16-year-old daughter, who shared a close bond with her mother, is especially devastated. Deshay had been a constant presence in her life, always ensuring she was cared for and loved. Now, the teenager must grapple with the loss of not only her mother but also the man who had been a part of their lives for years. Jasmine Stevenson, Deshay's sister, expressed the family's pain and confusion. She knew something was wrong when her niece called, as Deshay never left her daughter or partially paralyzed mother unattended. Jasmine voiced frustration over the red flags present in the relationship that weren't fully recognized in time to prevent the tragedy. She noted that Michael always appeared nice and friendly in front of the family, making his actions even more shocking. Why? Why would you take her away from us? She gave you everything, and you still took her life, Jasmine asked, heartbroken and enraged. Anita Stevenson, Deshay's cousin, revealed in an interview that just days before the incident, Deshay had spoken about wanting to save her marriage at all costs. This makes the story even more heart-wrenching, as the person responsible wasn't a stranger but her husband, the man she had supported through his incarceration and beyond. Court records show that authorities built their case based on surveillance footage and physical evidence from Michael's vehicle, including red bodily fluids, a bullet casing, and one of Deshay's sandals. Multiple firearms were also found during a search of his residence. The family is confident that the evidence is sufficient to secure a conviction. This tragic case highlights the complex dynamics of domestic violence, particularly in relationships where one partner feels overshadowed by the other's success. Michael's feelings of inadequacy, compounded by his substance abuse issues, likely contributed to the fatal confrontation. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships and the need for support systems for those experiencing domestic abuse. As Deshay's family mourned their devastating loss, they also called for justice. They grappled with haunting questions. Why had Michael committed this heinous act? What triggered such violence? And most crucially, how had they missed the warning signs that might have saved Deshay's life? Deshay's tragic death illuminates the broader issue of domestic violence. Michael's feelings of inadequacy,
likely exacerbated by Deshae's financial success and independence, combined with his substance abuse issues, may have fueled his violent outburst. His inability to accept Deshae's achievements became a source of tension, ultimately leading to the fatal confrontation. This aligns with studies showing that men's economic frustration or inability to fulfill societal expectations of being the breadwinner can contribute to the perpetration of physical and sexual violence within the home. Domestic violence often goes unnoticed, especially when the signs are subtle. In Deshae's case, her love for Michael and her desire to support him may have blinded her to the dangerous undercurrents in their relationship. She believed that her loyalty, financial support, and devotion would be enough to keep the relationship stable. However, Michael's toxic behavior and substance abuse issues created a volatile situation. This case highlights the complex dynamics of power and control in abusive relationships. The National Council Against Domestic Violence notes that batterers often begin and continue their behavior because violence is an effective method for gaining and keeping control over another person. 10. Michael's actions fit this pattern, using violence as a means to assert dominance over Deshae. As we reflect on this tragic case, it's important to consider the various factors that may have contributed to the violence. Was it Deshae's success that triggered Michael's actions? Was it primarily a financial issue, or were there deeper, ingrained patterns of aggression? These questions underscore the complexity of domestic violence situations and the need for comprehensive support and intervention strategies. By sharing Deshae's story, we hope to raise awareness about the warning signs of domestic violence and the importance of seeking help. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out to local support services or national hotlines for assistance. Remember, no one deserves to live in fear or under the threat of violence. Thank you for watching this video and engaging with this important topic. Your thoughts and experiences shared in the comments below can help others learn and potentially recognize warning signs in their own relationships. Together, we can work towards breaking the cycle of domestic violence and creating safer communities for all. Rachel Martinez couldn't pinpoint the exact moment her perfect life began to unravel, but she could trace the threads of her story back to where they first intertwined with Miguel's, that fateful property showing in the summer of 2015. Standing in her home office in the Horizon Tower, surrounded by the evidence of her husband's betrayal, she found herself replaying those early memories with newfound clarity. Born to academic parents in Santa Monica in 1990, Rachel had grown up with an almost obsessive attention to detail, a trait inherited from her mathematician father that would later prove both a blessing and a curse. Her childhood home had been a haven of logical thinking and emotional intelligence, with her mother's psychology practice providing a constant backdrop of human behavioral analysis. These influences shaped her into someone who could read both spreadsheets and people with equal precision. Her path to real estate hadn't been direct. After graduating from UCLA with honors in business administration, she had dabbled in investment banking, but found the work unfulfilling. It was during her first serious relationship, a 2-year engagement that ended with her fiancé's infidelity, that she discovered her talent for property. The process of finding her own place after the breakup had been therapeutic, and her analytical mind found satisfaction in the complex dynamics of real estate transactions. By 2015, at age 25, Rachel had established herself as one of Los Angeles' rising stars in luxury real estate. She had also built careful walls around her heart, the betrayal of her past relationship leaving her with a deep-seated fear of abandonment and a carefully maintained set of defenses. Then Miguel Martinez walked into her life, and those defenses crumbled like sand castles in the tide. The property showing was for a $12 million beachfront estate in Malibu. Miguel arrived 15 minutes early, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of success without trying too hard. His smile lit up the marble foyer as he introduced himself, and Rachel felt an immediate spark of connection that both thrilled and terrified her. "I apologize for my early arrival," he had said, his slight accent adding charm to his words. "I find that punctuality is a poor substitute for eagerness." The line should have been cheesy, but delivered with his warm brown eyes fixed on hers, it felt like poetry. What followed was the stuff of local legend in their social circle.
Their 3-hour property tour turned into dinner, which became a weekend of intense conversation and undeniable chemistry. Miguel pursued Rachel with a single-minded focus that swept away her reservations. Every detail was perfect. Flowers delivered to her office, surprise lunch dates, handwritten notes left on her car. He seemed to anticipate her every need, creating a courtship that felt like a fairy tale. Looking back, Rachel could now see how Miguel had perfectly crafted his approach. He had studied her, understanding that her analytical mind needed logical progression while her wounded heart craved romantic gestures. He built their relationship like one of his construction projects, with careful planning and flawless execution. Miguel's own story, as he told it then, seemed equally perfect. Born in Mexico City in 1988, he had come to the United States at age 10 when his father's construction business expanded northward. He had worked his way up from job sites to project management, eventually starting his own company. His success was self-made, his ambitions seemingly matched only by his devotion to Rachel. What Rachel didn't know then, what she would only discover years later through painstaking investigation, was that Miguel's charm had left a trail of broken hearts across Los Angeles' professional landscape. His construction company had provided the perfect cover for a pattern of seduction and manipulation that spanned years. Female clients, architects, and project managers had all fallen victim to his carefully orchestrated romances. Their whirlwind courtship culminated in a proposal after just 6 months. Miguel arranged a private sunset dinner on the rooftop of what would become their home, the exclusive Horizon Tower. He had supposedly just completed the building's construction, though Rachel would later learn this too was part of his elaborate web of deception. The proposal was witnessed by a random photographer who happened to capture the moment perfectly, and their engagement appeared in several local magazines. Rachel threw herself into their relationship with the same intensity she brought to her career. She scaled back her working hours, turned down opportunities for expansion, and focused on creating their perfect home. Her friends warned her she was moving too fast, but she dismissed their concerns. After all, she was the one who understood numbers, patterns, and probability. She had built a life centered around her children, working hard to create a stable, loving home in their quiet Minnesota community. Those who knew Victoria best said she approached motherhood with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything in life. Her boys were her world, and she had carefully chosen the Riverside Apartments complex for its safe neighborhood and proximity to their school. Every morning, she would wait early to make their breakfast, never missing a school event or sports game. The thought that she would miss her birthday breakfast with them was unthinkable to those who knew her dedication as a mother. Victoria always saw the good in everyone, her sister would later write in a heartbreaking social media post. That's who she was, someone who believed in giving people a chance, in the basic goodness of others. This trusting nature, a quality that made her so beloved in her community, would ultimately be exploited by the man who took her life. The day before her murder, Victoria had been excitedly planning her 39th birthday celebration with her sons. She had promised them a special breakfast the next morning, followed by a day at their favorite park. Her last text to her best friend read, "Can't wait for tomorrow, another year older, but grateful for every moment with my boys." Those words would later be read at her memorial service, a testament to the devoted mother whose life was cut tragically short. Victoria's apartment reflected her personality, warm, welcoming, and filled with photos of her children. On her refrigerator, investigators found a calendar marked with her son's activities, upcoming school events, and her own birthday circled in bright red marker. The morning she was killed, she had planned to open birthday cards her boys had carefully hidden in the kitchen cabinet the night before. What made the tragedy even more heartbreaking was how hard Victoria had worked to create a safe, stable life. She was known for being cautious, especially when it came to her children's safety. Her decision to trust Christopher Neal that night seemed out of character to those who knew her best, but friends later recalled how he had cleverly used their shared hometown connection to lower her guard. She probably felt safe because he knew all the same places, all the same people. One friend noted, he used that familiarity to make her feel comfortable. The investigation would reveal that Victoria had spent that final evening at a bar she knew well, surrounded by familiar faces.
She wasn't the type to go home with strangers, but Neil had spent hours gaining her confidence, playing on their shared background and appearing harmless. Security footage showed him acting charming and friendly, giving no indication of the violence that would follow. August 11, 2024, started as a typical summer evening in Sauk Rapids. Victoria had decided to stop by Murphy's Bar, a local establishment she frequently visited with friends, for a quiet drink before her birthday. The security footage from that night would later become crucial evidence, capturing every moment of her fateful encounter with Christopher Neal. At 11:47 p.m., cameras showed Victoria entering the bar wearing a blue summer dress, her favorite silver necklace catching the light. She chose a seat at the corner of the bar, ordering what would be her first and only drink of the night. It was around midnight when Christopher Neal first approached her. The security footage showed him deliberately choosing the seat next to her, despite several empty spaces at the bar. What initially seemed like a chance encounter would later reveal itself as something more calculated. Neal, as captured on the bar's cameras, spent the next hour engaging Victoria in conversation. He mentioned knowing her hometown, dropping names of places and people she knew. With each shared connection, Victoria's natural wariness seemed to fade. The footage showed her becoming more animated, laughing at his stories, her guard lowering with each passing minute. He seemed so normal, so familiar. The bartender would later tell investigators. They looked like old friends catching up, but Neal was far from the harmless figure he portrayed. Just 9 days earlier, he had been released on bail for a violent strangulation attack, a fact Victoria had no way of knowing as she sat beside him. At 1 a.m., the cameras captured what would be Victoria's final moments in public. Neal had offered to drive her home, citing concerns about her safety. The bitter irony of this gesture wouldn't be lost on investigators. Victoria was seen gathering her purse, her car keys glinting in her hand as she led the way to her black Chevy Equinox. The drive to Riverside Apartments took only 5 minutes. Security cameras in the parking lot recorded their arrival at 1:05 a.m. Victoria appeared relaxed, laughing at something Neal said as they walked toward the building's entrance. She used her key fob to let them in, the door closing behind them at 1:07 a.m. It would be the last time Victoria was seen alive. What transpired in the next 2 hours would only be pieced together through forensic evidence and the signs of struggle left behind. The layout of Victoria's apartment suggested she had initially invited Neal in willingly, perhaps for coffee or conversation.
2 cups were found on the kitchen counter, one with traces of lipstick matching Victoria's shade, the other untouched. The violence appeared to have erupted suddenly. Evidence indicated that Victoria had fought desperately for her life. Her broken nails, the overturned furniture, and the scattered contents of her purse painted a picture of a terrifying struggle. The medical examiner would later determine that the attack lasted several minutes, with Victoria conscious and fighting throughout most of it. At precisely 3 a.m., security cameras captured Neal leaving the building alone. His earlier friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by furtive glances and attempts to hide his face. He carried Victoria's car keys, which investigators noted had been in her purse, not on the counter as he would later claim. The footage showed him getting into Victoria's Equinox and driving away, leaving her lying lifeless in the apartment where she had built a home for her children. The investigation into Victoria's murder shifted into high gear once detectives realized they weren't just dealing with a random act of violence, but potentially the work of a serial offender. The crime scene at Riverside Apartments became a focal point of forensic activity, with investigators meticulously documenting every detail of the tragic final moments of Victoria's life. The medical examiner's findings painted a horrific picture of Victoria's final struggle. The bruising patterns on her neck told a story that contradicted Neal's claims of innocence. These weren't the marks of a brief encounter, noted the lead forensic investigator. The injuries showed sustained pressure, applied with practiced precision. Most disturbing was the similarity to the injuries reported in Neal's previous assault case, a pattern that suggested not just violence, but a signature method of attack. DNA evidence would prove crucial to the investigation. Swabs taken from Victoria's neck revealed genetic material from 2 sources. Neal's DNA emerged as the dominant profile, particularly concentrated in areas showing the worst bruising. A second, weaker DNA profile was also detected, but investigators quickly determined this likely came from casual contact earlier in the day, perhaps from one of her children or a friend. Victoria's apartment, typically kept immaculate for her children, had become a map of her final fight for life. A broken lamp in the living room suggested where the attack began. Scattered cushions and an overturned coffee table traced her desperate attempt to escape. Most telling was her bedroom,
where investigators found her phone still plugged into its charger. She never had a chance to call for help. The evidence trail extended beyond the apartment. Security footage from neighboring buildings captured Neil's exit from the complex in Victoria's car. Traffic cameras tracked the black Chevy Equinox heading south on Highway 10, then merging onto Interstate 35. Each ping from Victoria's stolen cell phone helped investigators track Neil's flight to Louisiana, where he apparently believed he could evade detection. When authorities finally caught up with Neil at a motel just outside New Orleans, they found more damning evidence. Victoria's car keys were in his pocket, her credit cards in his wallet. Her phone had been wiped clean and abandoned in a dumpster 3 states away. These weren't the actions of someone who, as Neil claimed, had left a woman alive and well in her apartment. Most incriminating was Neil's behavior during questioning. His claim of limited memory about the events in Victoria's apartment stood in stark contrast to his precise recall of their earlier conversation at the bar. He remembered details about their shared hometown but claimed to forget her name. When shown photos of Victoria's apartment, he recognized where he had been but insisted he couldn't remember what had happened there. The autopsy results delivered the final pieces of evidence needed to build a solid case. Victoria had died between 2:30 and 3 a.m., exactly the time frame when Neil was still in her apartment. The cause of death was manual strangulation, with defensive wounds on her hands and arms showing she had fought desperately until her last breath. Most chillingly, the method of strangulation matched exactly the technique described by Neil's previous victim, a woman who had survived to tell her story just 9 days earlier. Christopher Neil's path to becoming Victoria's alleged killer didn't begin the night they met at Murphy's bar. As investigators dug deeper into his past, they uncovered a disturbing pattern of escalating violence that painted a picture of a predator growing increasingly bold and dangerous with each passing year. Just 9 days before Victoria's murder, on August 1, 2024, Neil had faced charges for a strikingly similar attack. In that case, he had allegedly strangled a woman he was dating in Akin County. The victim survived to tell a haunting story that would later mirror Victoria's final moments. He seemed so normal at first, she had told police. Then something changed in his eyes, and his hands were around my throat. Despite the severity of this attack, Neil was released on bail on August 3rd, given a no-contact order, and walked free. But this wasn't just about 2 isolated incidents. As investigators pieced together Neil's history, they found a trail of police reports, restraining orders, and domestic disturbance calls stretching back years. Women in different counties had reported similar encounters, charm turning to violence, with strangulation being his weapon of choice. Most cases had been handled as routine domestic disputes, the pattern going unnoticed until it was too late. The evolution of Neil's violence was particularly chilling. He had started with domestic incidents, attacking women who knew him. Victoria represented a deadly escalation, the first time he had allegedly targeted a stranger. The shift from domestic violence to attacking someone he had just met showed a predator growing more confident, more brazen in his choices of victims. His method of approaching victims revealed careful calculation. With Victoria, he had used their shared hometown connection to gain trust. Security footage from Murphy's bar showed him watching her for nearly an hour before making his move, waiting until she was alone before approaching. This wasn't opportunistic violence. It was practiced, planned predation. Even more disturbing was Neil's behavior after each attack. In previous cases, he had shown a pattern of minimizing his actions, claiming memory loss, or insisting the women had exaggerated their injuries. With Victoria's case, he followed the same playbook, admitting to being in her apartment but claiming no memory of the violence, despite the clear evidence of his deliberate actions afterward. The violation of his no-contact order from the August 1st case revealed another aspect of Neil's personality, a complete disregard for legal restrictions. On the very day Victoria's body was discovered, August 12th, the Akin County Sheriff's Office was already processing paperwork for his violation of the order. He had allegedly attempted to contact his previous victim, showing a pattern of continued harassment that would only end with his arrest for Victoria's murder. What made Neil particularly dangerous was his ability to appear harmless. Bar patrons who saw him with Victoria described him as charming, well-spoken, and completely normal. This facade of normality allowed him to move through society virtually undetected, making him the kind of predator that law enforcement finds most challenging to stop before tragedy strikes. The manhunt for Christopher Neil ended at the Red Pine Motel, a rundown establishment just outside New Orleans, Louisiana. After nearly a week of tracking cell phone signals and following Victoria's stolen credit card transactions, authorities finally closed in on August 18, 2024. They found Victoria's black Chevy Equinox parked outside
outside room 114, its Minnesota plates covered with mud in an apparent attempt to avoid detection. The arrest itself was anticlimactic. Neil surrendered without resistance when federal marshals and local police breached his room at 6:15 a.m. He was found fully dressed, lying on top of the bed covers, as if he had been expecting them. In his possession were Victoria's car keys, credit cards, and apartment key fob, items he had taken from her purse after allegedly taking her life. What struck investigators was Neil's demeanor during arrest. He showed no emotion, no signs of distress or surprise. When informed he was being charged with Victoria's murder, he reportedly just nodded and said, "I want a lawyer." This cold composure contrasted sharply with the violent struggle evidenced in Victoria's apartment just days before. The charges against Neil began to stack up quickly. In Benton County, where Victoria's murder occurred, prosecutors filed second-degree murder charges. The criminal complaint detailed the brutality of the attack, citing the medical examiner's findings of severe neck trauma and defensive wounds. The DNA evidence, security footage, and Neil's flight to Louisiana were listed as key elements supporting the murder charge. But Neil's legal troubles extended beyond Victoria's case. In Akin County, he still faced charges for the August 1st strangulation attack. The violation of his no-contact order from that case added another charge. Prosecutors in both counties began coordinating their efforts, building a case that would show Neil's pattern of escalating violence. During his first court appearance in Benton County, Neil maintained his story of limited memory about the night of Victoria's death. Through his court-appointed attorney, he entered a not guilty plea. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. They described a calculated predator who had watched Victoria at the bar, gained her trust through manipulation, and then killed her in her own home. The bail hearing revealed the full extent of the prosecution's concerns about Neil's danger to society. They presented evidence of his previous strangulation attack, the violated no-contact order, and his attempt to flee the state. The judge, noting the escalating pattern of violence and flight risk, ordered Neil held without bail, a decision that brought visible relief to Victoria's family in the courtroom. As Neil was led away in shackles, attention turned to the broader implications of his case. Questions arose about how he had been free to allegedly kill Victoria despite the recent strangulation charge. The prosecutor's office faced scrutiny over their handling of his previous case, where he had been released on bail despite showing clear signs of being a danger to women. In the quiet Minnesota town of Sauk Rapids, the impact of Victoria's murder rippled through the community like shockwaves. Her two young boys, who had waited eagerly for their mother to join them for birthday breakfast that August morning, now faced a future without her guidance, love, and ever-present smile. Their lives, once filled with the routine of school days and their mother's constant presence, had been shattered by one night of senseless violence. Victoria's family launched a GoFundMe page, not just to cover funeral expenses, but to create a trust fund for her son's future. The page became a testament to who Victoria was, filled with stories from those who knew her. She was more than just a victim, wrote her sister. Victoria was the kind of person who would give you her last dollar if you needed it. She taught her boys to be kind, to be strong, and to always help others. Now we have to help them carry on without her. The local community's response was overwhelming. Murphy's Bar, where Victoria spent her final hours, hosted a fundraiser for her children. Regular patrons shared stories of her infectious laugh, her proud conversations about her boys' achievements, and her bubbly personality that could brighten even the darkest days. She wasn't just another customer, the bartender recalled. Victoria was family to everyone who knew her, but beneath the outpouring of support ran an undercurrent of anger and frustration. Victoria's death had exposed critical failures in a system designed to protect vulnerable individuals. Her family spoke out publicly about these systemic gaps. 9 days, her brother said during a community meeting. Just 9 days between Neil's release and Victoria's death. The system had him in custody, knew he was dangerous, and still let him walk free. The impact of Victoria's death extended beyond her immediate circle. Local domestic violence organizations reported an increase in calls for help, with many women citing her story as their wake-up call. The Sauk Rapids Police Department began reviewing its protocols for handling strangulation cases, acknowledging that these incidents often precede more serious violence. In a cruel twist of fate, Victoria's birthday, August 12, now marks both her death and her legacy. Her family has established the Victoria Gamble Foundation, dedicated to raising awareness about domestic violence and advocating for stricter bail conditions in strangulation cases. "We couldn't save Victoria," her mother said at the foundation's launch, but maybe we can save someone else's daughter, someone else's mother. As Christopher Neal awaits trial in Benton County, Victoria's story continues to resonate. Her death has become a catalyst for change, prompting discussions about how the justice system handles violent offenders and the need for better protection for potential victims. But for those who loved her, Victoria was more than a cautionary tale or a statistic. She was a mother who lived for her children, a friend who never failed to lift others up, and a woman whose trust in others ultimately cost her everything. Today, Victoria's apartment at Riverside remains empty, a silent reminder of the tragedy that unfolded there. Her black Chevy Equinox, recovered from Louisiana, sits in an evidence lot, but her spirit lives on through her sons, through the foundation bearing her name, and through the changes her death has inspired in her community. While it's too late for Victoria, her story serves as both a warning and a call to action, a reminder that patterns of violence, left unchecked, can escalate with devastating consequences.
The piercing wail of police sirens shattered the pre-dawn silence in Dubai's exclusive Emirates Hills community. Red and blue lights reflected off the marble facades of multimillion-dollar villas as emergency vehicles converged on Villa 42, a sprawling 6-bedroom mansion overlooking the golf course. Inside, a scene that would shock even veteran investigators was unfolding. James Mitchell, 45, a prominent international banker, lay dead in his home office, while his wife Sarah, still in her designer nightgown, sat calmly in the living room, hands folded in her lap. British expatriate wife murders banking executive husband in Dubai villa. The headlines would scream the next morning. But the story that would emerge in the following weeks would reveal a web of lies, betrayal, and a double life that spanned 2 continents. The perfect expatriate life that Sarah and James Mitchell had carefully curated on social media was about to unravel in the most spectacular way. Sarah Mitchell, May Walker, was born into a middle-class family in London's Hampstead neighbourhood in 1985. The daughter of a secondary school teacher and a librarian, Sarah showed remarkable drive and intelligence from an early age. Her teachers at the prestigious North London Collegiate School often remarked on her ability to excel both academically and socially. This combination of sharp intellect and natural charm would later serve her well in the cutthroat world of international finance. After graduating with first-class honours from the London School of Economics, Sarah quickly established herself as a rising star in investment banking. By her late 20s, she had already made a name for herself at Goldman Sachs, known for her keen analytical mind and ability to close complex deals. Her colleagues remembered her as focused, ambitious, and always impeccably presented. Sarah was the kind of person who made everything look effortless, recalled Maria Torres, a former colleague. She could work on a multimillion-dollar deal all day and still show up looking fresh for client drinks in the evening. It was at the 2012 Global Financial Summit in Singapore where Sarah first met James Mitchell. James, then a senior executive at HSBC's international division, caught her attention during a panel discussion on emerging markets. Their eyes met across the conference room, remembered David Chen, who was sitting next to Sarah. It was like something out of a movie. James, tall and distinguished with prematurely grey hair that only added to his charm, approached Sarah during the evening networking event. Their conversation about market volatility in Asian markets quickly turned personal, and they ended up talking until the venue staff began stacking chairs around them. Their romance progressed with the same intensity and precision that characterized their professional lives. Weekend trips to Paris, holidays in the Maldives, and elaborate dates filled their courtship. James proposed 6 months later on a private yacht in the Mediterranean, presenting Sarah with a flawless 5-carat diamond ring. The wedding, held at the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, was a lavish affair that made the society pages. 200 guests flew in from around the world to witness their union, with the bride in a custom-made Vera Wang gown and the groom in a Tom Ford tuxedo. The newlyweds settled into Dubai's expatriate life with ease. James's position as regional director for HSBC's private banking division provided them with a lifestyle most could only dream of. Their villa in Emirates Hills, purchased for $12 million, became known for hosting elegant dinner parties where Dubai's elite would gather. Sarah, who had transferred to Goldman Sachs's Dubai office, quickly established herself in the local social scene. Together, They were the golden couple of Dubai's expatriate community. Their Instagram feeds painted a picture of perfection. Sarah and James at Royal Ascot, mixing with British aristocracy. Charity galas at the Amani Hotel. Weekend desert safaris in their Range Rover, holidays in the Seychelles. Their friends often commented on how in love they still seemed, even after years of marriage. They were always touching, always laughing at each other's jokes, said Rebecca Henderson, a close friend of Sarah's. They were the couple we all wanted to be. The only shadow in their seemingly perfect life was their struggle with infertility. After 3 years of marriage, Sarah and James began IVF treatments at Dubai's top fertility clinic. The process was emotionally draining, but friends noted how it seemed to bring them closer together. Sarah later confided in Rebecca that James had been incredibly supportive during their failed attempts, never pressuring her and always remaining optimistic about their future. Their property portfolio grew alongside their social status. Beyond their Emirates Hills villa, they acquired a penthouse in Dubai Marina, a ski chalet in Switzerland, and a pied-à-terre in London's Mayfair. James's expertise in international banking proved lucrative in Dubai's booming real estate market, and their investments seemed to multiply effortlessly. But beneath the glossy surface, cracks were beginning to appear. The first signs were subtle, so subtle that Sarah would later question whether she had imagined them. James's business trips became more frequent and longer in duration. While this wasn't unusual in international banking, something felt different. His usual pattern of daily video calls while traveling became sporadic. He cited poor internet connections in various locations. Yet his social media showed him in luxury hotels known for their excellent connectivity. Financial discrepancies began to surface. Small at first, unexplained charges at restaurants on days when James was supposedly in board meetings. Hotel bookings in cities he hadn't mentioned visiting. Sarah, with her background in finance, noticed these irregularities but initially dismissed them as corporate expenses or accounting errors. Then came the password changes on their shared accounts, with James citing increased cybersecurity requirements at work. His personality began to shift in subtle ways. The man who had once shared every detail of his day became increasingly vague about his whereabouts. He established new email accounts, explaining them as necessary for client confidentiality. Their once spontaneous dinner conversations became stilted, with James often appearing distracted, constantly checking his phone. Friends started noticing changes too. James used to be so present at our gatherings, noted Michael Chong, a fellow banker. Suddenly he was always stepping away to take calls, always had an excuse to leave early. Their famous dinner parties became less frequent, and when they did occur, James often appeared preoccupied or arrived late, citing work commitments. The unexplained absences multiplied. Weekend trips to London for emergency board meetings that Sarah later discovered had never been scheduled. Last-minute flights to Singapore that didn't appear on his corporate credit card statements. Documents related to their property investments, which they had always maintained meticulously together, went missing from their home office. Sarah's growing unease was compounded by strange occurrences. Calls that went silent when she answered, text messages that arrived at odd hours and were quickly explained away. Credit card statements showed purchases at high-end jewelry stores that never materialized as gifts. The man who had once been an open book to her was becoming a mystery. As 2023 drew to a close, Sarah Mitchell found herself living in a state of constant anxiety, analyzing every conversation, every gesture, every unexplained absence. The perfect life she had built with James was beginning to feel like an elaborate facade. Little did she know that what she had noticed was merely the tip of an iceberg of deception that would ultimately lead to a bloody confrontation in their perfect Dubai home. The strange phone calls were about to be explained. The missing documents would soon make terrible sense. And the truth about James Mitchell's absences would shake the foundations of everything Sarah thought she knew about her marriage. But for now, she remained in their marble palace, surrounded by the trappings of success, trying to convince herself that she was imagining things. The real nightmare was yet to begin. The decision to hire a private investigator wasn't one Sarah Mitchell made lightly. Each small doubt, each unexplained absence, each forgotten anniversary had piled up like grains of sand until they finally tipped the scales of her certainty. As she sat in the discreet office of Hassan al-Rashid, a former Dubai police detective turned private investigator, her manicured nails dug into the leather armrests of her chair. "I need to know what my husband does when he's supposedly at work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Hassan, having handled numerous cases involving Dubai's expatriate community, recognized the familiar signs of a marriage crumbling under the weight of suspicion. What he couldn't know was that this case would become one of the most complex and tragic he'd ever encounter. The investigation began with surgical precision. Hassan assembled his elite team, former intelligence officers, digital forensics experts, and financial investigators. They deployed a sophisticated network of surveillance techniques, combining old-school physical tracking with cutting-edge digital monitoring. James Mitchell's daily routines were mapped with meticulous detail, every deviation from his official schedule noted and cross-referenced. The first red flag appeared within days. After leaving his office at HSBC's regional headquarters in downtown Dubai, James's Mercedes took an unexpected turn. Instead of heading to the business dinner he'd told Sarah about, he wound through the quieter streets of Jumeirah, eventually stopping at Ulsif Towers, a luxury apartment complex known for its discretion and high-profile residents. "We have something," Hassan told Sarah 3 days later, spreading photographs across his desk. The images showed James entering the building through a private entrance, carrying shopping bags from high-end boutiques. Security footage revealed he visited this location 3 to 4 times every week, always following the same careful route to avoid main roads with traffic cameras. But it was the balcony photograph that first broke Sarah's composure. The image showed James, relaxed in casual clothes she'd never seen, holding a young child. 2 other children played at his feet, their features unmistakably similar to his. The twins appeared to be about 3 years old, Hassan explained gently. The younger one is approximately 14 months. The property investigation revealed the apartment had been purchased through a shell company called Desert Rose Holdings 5 years earlier. The paper trail led to a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, carefully structured to avoid detection. Bank statements showed regular transfers maintaining a lifestyle that paralleled Sarah's own: private school fees, luxury car payments, designer shopping sprees. Digital forensics unveiled a separate email account, multiple social media profiles under slight variations of James's name, and a pattern of careful digital compartmentalization that spoke of long-term planning. But it was the discovery of the marriage certificate that shattered Sarah's world completely. Filed with Dubai's Islamic Affairs Department was a legal document showing James's marriage to Amora Khalil, performed 4 years ago. The certificate listed James under his legal name but included his conversion to Islam, a requirement for marrying a Muslim woman in the UAE. The document was legitimate, properly notarized, and bore official government seals. Amora Khalil emerged as a figure far more formidable than Sarah had initially imagined. Born into one of Dubai's prominent merchant families, she held a PhD in chemical engineering from Imperial College London and served as a research director at Dubai Science Park. Her family's connections in Dubai's business community had initially helped James establish key banking relationships. The irony that her own husband's success might have been partially built on his relationship with his second wife wasn't lost on Sarah. Hassan's team pieced together Amora's background through careful investigation. She came from a family that perfectly straddled Dubai's traditional values and modern ambitions. Her father, Abdullah Khalil, sat on the boards of several government-linked companies. Her mother, while maintaining a traditional public profile, was quietly influential in Dubai's education sector. James had met Amora at a renewable energy conference in Abu Dhabi 6 years ago, just 2 years into his marriage with Sarah. Their Islamic marriage took place during one of his supposed business trips to Singapore. The apartment purchase, the births of the children, even family holidays, all had been orchestrated during James's increasingly frequent absences. The children's existence hit Sarah particularly hard. Twins Zara and Yasmin, aged 3, attended the same prestigious British curriculum school that Sarah and James had once discussed for their own future children. 1-year-old Sophia had been born during a period when James had claimed to be stuck in Hong Kong due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Amora's life with James was extensively documented on private social media accounts that Hassan's team had managed to access. The photos showed a different version of James, relaxed in traditional Emirati dress at family gatherings, teaching his twins to swim, crowding his youngest daughter in the hospital just months ago. The stark contrast to his polished, Western executive persona in Sarah's world was jarring. The second family's lifestyle, while luxurious, had a distinctly different character from Sarah's. Where Sarah and James's life centered on international glamour and social status, James's life with Amora was deeply integrated into Dubai's local community. Their apartment, though opulent, was chosen for its proximity to both Amora's family compound and the children's school. Regular gatherings with extended family, religious observations, and local traditions filled their calendar. Amora's family's involvement added another layer of complexity. Her father had apparently welcomed James into their fold, helping him navigate the cultural and business landscape of the UAE. Photos showed James participating in family celebrations, desert camps, and religious festivities. He had seamlessly adapted to the cultural expectations of his second life.
Learning Arabic and observing Islamic customs. The financial arrangements supporting this double life proved to be even more elaborate than initially suspected. James had created a complex web of offshore companies and trusts, moving money through multiple jurisdictions to maintain both households. The discovery of these financial structures led Hassan's team to an even more disturbing revelation. Some of the transactions showed patterns consistent with money laundering. As the investigation deepened, evidence of larger financial crimes emerged. James had apparently been using his position at HSBC to facilitate complex fraud schemes. Shell companies similar to those used to purchase the Jumeirah apartment were involved in suspicious transactions across Asia and the Middle East. Client funds had been diverted through a labyrinth of offshore accounts, with millions seemingly vanishing into untraceable investments. Sarah's world collapsed as each new piece of evidence emerged. She stopped sleeping, lost weight rapidly, and began having panic attacks. Her perfect life, she realized, had been built on an elaborate foundation of lies. Friends noticed her withdrawal from social activities, but she couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she admit that her sophisticated, successful husband had constructed an entirely separate life less than 30 minutes away? The investigation uncovered more than just the second family. There were other women too, business trips that coincided with meetings with the same women in different cities, hotel bookings under aliases, gifts purchased and sent to addresses in London, Singapore, and Hong Kong. James's betrayal wasn't just a second family. It was a pattern of systematic deception that spanned continents. As Sarah delved deeper into their financial records, she discovered hidden assets she'd never known about. Properties in Thailand and Malaysia, registered under different company names. Investment accounts in Switzerland and Luxembourg. Most disturbingly, she found evidence of massive financial fraud within James's division at HSBC, fake investment schemes, inflated returns, and misappropriated client funds. The discovery of multiple passports in James's private office safe, some under slightly different names, suggested connections to even darker activities. These weren't merely second identities for managing his double life. They were tools for moving money and evading detection. The sophisticated nature of these documents pointed to connections with professional criminal networks. Sarah's mental health deteriorated rapidly as the scale of James's deception became clear.
She began recording everything obsessively: times, dates, locations, transactions. Her home office walls became covered with documents, photos, and sticky notes, mapping out James's elaborate deceptions. She barely ate, spending hours staring at Hassan's surveillance footage, watching her husband move effortlessly between his two lives. The final straw came when Sarah discovered James had been systematically moving their joint assets into accounts she couldn't access. Future plans found in his encrypted emails revealed his intention to transfer to HSBC's Hong Kong office, but not with her. The transfer request mentioned his family, Amora and the children, would be joining him. Sarah realized she was not only being betrayed but was being slowly erased from his life. In her darkest moments, alone in their vast villa, Sarah began to plan. She knew confronting James would be dangerous, not just emotionally, but potentially physically. The evidence of his criminal connections suggested he was capable of far more than just marital infidelity. She gathered documents, made copies, stored evidence in secure locations. She contacted a lawyer specializing in international divorce cases, But as she prepared for a legal confrontation, something inside Sarah snapped. The weight of the betrayal, the humiliation of discovering her entire marriage had been a sophisticated lie, the rage at realizing the children she had desperately wanted, James had fathered with another woman, it all became too much. The carefully gathered evidence and legal preparations gave way to a darker plan. On the night of February 15, 2024, Sarah sat in their home office, surrounded by the evidence of her husband's betrayal, and made a decision that would shock Dubai's expatriate community and make headlines around the world. The perfect life she had thought she was living was about to end in violence, forever changing multiple families and exposing a web of deceit that would have international repercussions. February 15, 2024, began like any other day in Dubai's exclusive Emirates Hills community. The morning sun cast long shadows across manicured lawns as domestic staff arrived at their employers' villas. Security cameras captured Sarah Mitchell's Mercedes leaving the compound at 7:15 a.m., following her usual route to Goldman Sachs' office in the DIFC. James Mitchell departed 30 minutes later, his own Mercedes heading toward HSBC headquarters. What the security footage didn't reveal was that Sarah never made it to her office. Instead, she drove to Festival City Mall, parked her car, and took a taxi back to Emirates Hills. She entered the villa through the service entrance at 8:45 a.m., careful to avoid the main security cameras. The household staff had been given the day off, an unusual occurrence that would later raise questions among investigators. Throughout the day, Sarah methodically prepared for what she had planned. Security footage showed her making 3 separate trips to different hardware stores across Dubai, paying cash each time. Phone records would later reveal a series of calls between Sarah and James, their final communications painting a picture of calculated deception. "Darling, I'm not feeling well. Could you come home early today?" Sarah's voice on the recorded line was perfectly calibrated, concerned enough to warrant attention, but not so distressed as to cause alarm. James's response was typically distracted. "I have meetings until 6, but I'll try to wrap up early." At 4:47 p.m., Sarah sent a text message that would later be key evidence. "I've made your favorite dinner. Please come home soon. We need to talk." James replied at 5:03 p.m., "Leaving office now. Be home in 30. The security cameras at the main gate captured James's car entering Emirates Hills at 5:42 p.m. Neighbors would later recall nothing unusual about his arrival. The same car, the same time, the same routine they had observed countless times before. But the interior cameras of Villa 42, which Sarah had deliberately disabled, would tell no tales of what happened next. The reconstruction of events, based on forensic evidence and Sarah's eventual confession, painted a chilling picture. James entered through the main door, calling out as he always did. The house was unusually quiet, the normal sounds of staff moving about notably absent. He found Sarah in his home office, sitting calmly behind his desk. On the desk lay evidence of his double life, photographs of Amora and the children, bank statements showing his hidden accounts, copies of his second marriage certificate. But what James couldn't see was the 9mm Glock pistol Sarah had acquired through connections she'd made during her investigation.
"We need to talk about Amora," Sarah said quietly. The name hung in the air between them. Security guard Mohammed Rahman, patrolling the street outside, would later report hearing raised voices from the villa around 6 p.m., though this was not unusual in the neighborhood. What happened next was reconstructed through forensic evidence. The first shot was fired from approximately 3 meters away, striking James in the chest. He stumbled backward, knocking over a Mont Blanc pen holder that would later be found under his body. The second shot, fired from closer range, struck his head. The third shot, seemingly unnecessary but telling of Sarah's state of mind, was fired into his heart at point-blank range. The villa's soundproofed walls muffled the gunshots, but the security system's vibration sensors registered 3 distinct impacts. At 6:13 p.m., Sarah placed a call to emergency services. Her voice, recorded by the dispatcher, was eerily calm. "I've just shot my husband. Villa 42, Emirates Hills. Please send the police." The first responders arrived within 7 minutes. Officer Khalid Al-Mansouri, first on the scene, found the front door open and Sarah sitting in the living room, the gun placed on the coffee table before her. James's body lay in the office, surrounded by scattered documents, the evidence of his deception mixed with his blood. The crime scene investigators arrived at 6:45 p.m., led by Captain Fatima Al-Hashemi, one of Dubai Police's most experienced forensic experts. The scene was methodically documented. 3 9mm shell casings, blood spatter patterns indicating the sequence of shots, and the scattered documentation of James's double life creating a bizarre backdrop to the violence. News of the shooting spread quickly through Emirates Hill's tight-knit expatriate community. Residents gathered behind the police cordon, watching as crime scene technicians moved in and out of the villa. The darkness was punctuated by camera flashes and the rotating lights of police vehicles. Sarah's behavior during the immediate aftermath struck many as bizarre. She remained calm, almost detached, as she was led to the police car. When asked if she needed to collect any personal items, she replied, "Everything I need to know is in the office." She made no attempt to contact a lawyer, family, or friends. The initial police interrogation, conducted at Dubai Police Station, revealed a woman who had meticulously planned her actions. Sarah provided detailed accounts of her discoveries about James's second family, the financial crimes, and her decision to confront him. Her statement, recorded over 6 hours, was remarkably coherent for someone who had just committed murder. "I couldn't let him leave us both," she told investigators. "He was planning to disappear to Hong Kong with her and the children. All these years of lies, of watching me go through fertility treatments while he had children with her. I couldn't let him win." The crime scene investigation continued through the night. Forensics teams discovered Sarah had lined the office walls with plastic sheeting before the confrontation, suggesting premeditation. The murder weapon was traced to a black market arms dealer in Dira, though Sarah refused to reveal how she had made the connection. Media outlets descended on Emirates Hills within hours. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, a secret second family, and murder in Dubai's most exclusive community. Headlines around the world blared variations of "Expatriate wife murders banker husband after discovering secret family." The community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors expressed shock, describing Sarah and James as the perfect couple. Others, particularly those who had noticed changes in Sarah's behavior over recent months, admitted to suspecting something was wrong. The revelation of James's second family and financial crimes added layers of complexity to what might have been a simple crime of passion. Within hours of the murder, both families were drawn into the vortex of the investigation. Sarah's parents flew in from London, arriving to find their daughter in police custody and their son-in-law's crimes splashed across international media. James's family, struggling to process both his death and the revelations about his double life, issued a brief statement requesting privacy. Amora Khalil, James's second wife, went into seclusion with her children. Her prominent family's connections meant the media couldn't get close, but sources reported she had been unaware of James's first marriage. The discovery that she too had been deceived added another tragic dimension to the case. The autopsy, conducted at Dubai Police's forensic laboratory, confirmed the sequence of events Sarah had described, showed a woman unraveling. She spent 3 hours pacing her kitchen, making frantic calls to her bank, her lawyer, and finally, fatefully, to Kevin. At Memphis East High School, the whispers had become a roar. Kevin's sudden removal from the swim team sparked speculation that reached far beyond the pool deck. Coach Thompson found himself fielding calls from college recruiters, trying to explain the unexplainable. How do you tell Texas that your star swimmer isn't just slipping? He's drowning in something you can't even discuss. Thompson would later ask the grand jury. Lisa Anderson's worst fears were confirmed when she received an anonymous envelope at the hospital where she worked. Inside were photos of her son leaving expensive restaurants with Sarah, receipts for jewelry, hotel charges from neighboring towns. The final item was a handwritten note. "Do you know where your son really is when you're working nights?" The confrontation that followed shook the Anderson household to its foundation. Lisa, still in her scrubs from a 12-hour shift, waited up until Kevin came home at 2 a.m. "I didn't even recognize him anymore," Lisa would sob during her testimony. "When I showed him the photos, he didn't deny it. He just looked at me with these dead eyes and said, 'You don't understand our love.' By September 1st, The school administration had no choice but to take official action. An emergency meeting was called.
And make headlines around the world. The perfect life she had thought she was living was about to end in violence, forever changing multiple families and exposing a web of deceit that would have international repercussions. February 15, 2024, began like any other day in Dubai's exclusive Emirates Hills community. The morning sun cast long shadows across manicured lawns as domestic staff arrived at their employers' villas. Security cameras captured Sarah Mitchell's Mercedes leaving the compound at 7:15 a.m., following her usual route to Goldman Sachs' office in the DIFC. James Mitchell departed 30 minutes later, his own Mercedes heading toward HSBC headquarters. What the security footage didn't reveal was that Sarah never made it to her office. Instead, she drove to Festival City Mall, parked her car, and took a taxi back to Emirates Hills. She entered the villa through the service entrance at 8:45 a.m., careful to avoid the main security cameras. The household staff had been given the day off, an unusual occurrence that would later raise questions among investigators. Throughout the day, Sarah methodically prepared for what she had planned. Security footage showed her making 3 separate trips to different hardware stores across Dubai, paying cash each time. Phone records would later reveal a series of calls between Sarah and James, their final communications painting a picture of calculated deception. "Darling, I'm not feeling well. Could you come home early today?" Sarah's voice on the recorded line was perfectly calibrated, concerned enough to warrant attention, but not so distressed as to cause alarm. James's response was typically distracted. "I have meetings until 6, but I'll try to wrap up early." At 4:47 p.m., Sarah sent a text message that would later be key evidence. "I've made your favorite dinner. Please come home soon. We need to talk." James replied at 5:03 p.m., "Leaving office now. Be home in 30. The security cameras at the main gate captured James's car entering Emirates Hills at 5:42 p.m. Neighbors would later recall nothing unusual about his arrival. The same car, the same time, the same routine they had observed countless times before. But the interior cameras of Villa 42, which Sarah had deliberately disabled, would tell no tales of what happened next. The reconstruction of events, based on forensic evidence and Sarah's eventual confession, painted a chilling picture. James entered through the main door, calling out as he always did. The house was unusually quiet, the normal sounds of staff moving about notably absent. He found Sarah in his home office, sitting calmly behind his desk. On the desk lay evidence of his double life, photographs of Amora and the children, bank statements showing his hidden accounts, copies of his second marriage certificate. But what James couldn't see was the 9mm Glock pistol Sarah had acquired through connections she'd made during her investigation.
"We need to talk about Amora," Sarah said quietly. The name hung in the air between them. Security guard Mohammed Rahman, patrolling the street outside, would later report hearing raised voices from the villa around 6 p.m., though this was not unusual in the neighborhood. What happened next was reconstructed through forensic evidence. Victoria's story became a blueprint for dismantling systems of privileged exploitation. Perhaps most significantly, Victoria's death changed how society views wealth and vulnerability. Her careful documentation exposed how predators use money to create and maintain systems of abuse. Media coverage shifted from sensationalizing May-December romances to examining power dynamics in relationships with large wealth disparities. The Victoria Project's prevention program now operates in schools nationwide. Students learn to recognize grooming tactics, understand financial manipulation, and identify signs of systematic abuse. The curriculum, initially controversial, has become a model for teaching young people about the intersection of wealth and exploitation. 2 years after Victoria's death, her impact continues to grow. Each new investigation using Victoria's law protocols brings more predators to justice. Every woman helped by the Victoria Project carries forward her legacy. The systemic changes she died to create have fundamentally altered how society handles wealth-enabled crime. In Franklin, Tennessee, a small memorial garden stands where Victoria once practiced violin. The plaque reads simply, "Victoria Anderson." She turned her tragedy into triumph, her death into justice, her story into change,
Sophie visits often, bringing fresh flowers and new stories of lives saved through her sister's sacrifice. Victoria knew she wouldn't survive, she tells visitors, but she made sure her death would protect others. That's not tragedy, that's heroism. It was punctuated by camera flashes and the rotating lights of police vehicles. Sarah's behavior during the immediate aftermath struck many as bizarre. She remained calm, almost detached, as she was led to the police car. When asked if she needed to collect any personal items, she replied, "Everything I need to know is in the office." She made no attempt to contact a lawyer, family, or friends. The initial police interrogation, conducted at Dubai Police Station, revealed a woman who had meticulously planned her actions. Sarah provided detailed accounts of her discoveries about James's second family, the financial crimes, and her decision to confront him. Her statement, recorded over 6 hours, was remarkably coherent for someone who had just committed murder. "I couldn't let him leave us both," she told investigators. "He was planning to disappear to Hong Kong with her and the children. All these years of lies, of watching me go through fertility treatments while he had children with her. I couldn't let him win." The crime scene investigation continued through the night. Forensics teams discovered Sarah had lined the office walls with plastic sheeting before the confrontation, suggesting premeditation. The murder weapon was traced to a black market arms dealer in Dira, though Sarah refused to reveal how she had made the connection. Media outlets descended on Emirates Hills within hours. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, a secret second family, and murder in Dubai's most exclusive community. Headlines around the world blared variations of "Expatriate wife murders banker husband after discovering secret family." The community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors expressed shock, describing Sarah and James as the perfect couple. Others, particularly those who had noticed changes in Sarah's behavior over recent months, admitted to suspecting something was wrong. The revelation of James's second family and financial crimes added layers of complexity to what might have been a simple crime of passion. Within hours of the murder, both families were drawn into the vortex of the investigation. Sarah's parents flew in from London, arriving to find their daughter in police custody and their son-in-law's crimes splashed across international media. James's family, struggling to process both his death and the revelations about his double life, issued a brief statement requesting privacy. Amora Khalil, James's second wife, went into seclusion with her children. Her prominent family's connections meant the media couldn't get close, but sources reported she had been unaware of James's first marriage. The discovery that she too had been deceived added another tragic dimension to the case. The autopsy, conducted at Dubai Police's forensic laboratory, confirmed the sequence of events Sarah had described. Showed a woman unraveling. She spent 3 hours pacing her kitchen, making frantic calls to her bank, her lawyer, and finally, fatefully, to Kevin. At Memphis East High School, the whispers had become a roar. Kevin's sudden removal from the swim team sparked speculation that reached far beyond. The investigation had exposed vulnerabilities in international banking systems, raised questions about cultural integration in expatriate communities, and challenged assumptions about privilege and justice in Dubai's glittering financial district. For the investigators, prosecutors, and defense teams, the case represented a unique confluence of personal tragedy and systemic failure. As they prepared for the trial's final phase, all involved knew that the verdict would have implications far beyond the fate of Sarah Mitchell. The final phase of Sarah Mitchell's trial began on a sweltering Dubai morning in July 2024. The Dubai Criminal Court was packed with international media, legal observers, and members of both the expatriate and local communities. Sarah, noticeably thinner but composed in a conservative black suit, sat quietly as Chief Justice Abdullah Al-Nuaimi prepared to hear final arguments. The prosecution's closing testimony centered on Dr. Rashid Al-Jabri, Dubai's leading forensic psychiatrist, whose evaluation had found Sarah legally sane at the time of the murder. Mrs. Mitchell exhibited clear planning abilities and awareness of consequences, he testified. Her actions showed precision, not panic. This was calculated revenge, not temporary insanity. The defense countered with Dr. Elizabeth Stanford, a British expert in trauma psychology, who painted a picture of cumulative emotional damage. The combination of fertility struggles,
discovery of the second family, and financial betrayal created a perfect storm of psychological trauma, she argued. Mrs. Mitchell experienced what we call complex betrayal trauma, leading to a dissociative state during the shooting. The jury selection had been particularly challenging due to the case's high profile. The final panel included 4 Emiratis, 3 Western expatriates, and 2 Asian professionals, reflecting Dubai's diverse professional community. They listened intently as financial expert Samir Al-Rashid detailed the staggering scope of James's fraud. The total impact of Mr. Mitchell's financial crimes exceeds $100 million, Al-Rashid testified. He didn't just betray his wives. He betrayed financial systems across 3 continents. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Sarah Mitchell was found guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser charge than the first-degree murder the prosecution had sought. The verdict acknowledged the element of premeditation, but considered the extreme emotional circumstances as a mitigating factor. Chief Justice Al-Nuaimi's sentencing statement made international headlines. This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances that led to this tragedy. However, we cannot condone taking the law into one's own hands. Sarah was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of deportation to the UK after serving 10 years. The appeals process began immediately. Sarah's legal team, citing new evidence about James's criminal connections, argued that she had acted in part out of fear for her life. The appeal highlighted previously undisclosed threats James had made when confronted about his second family. The international implications of the case were far-reaching. The British Foreign Office engaged in quiet diplomacy to ensure Sarah would serve her sentence in humane conditions. HSBC faced regulatory scrutiny in multiple jurisdictions, leading to major reforms in their compliance procedures. The case established several legal precedents in UAE law, particularly regarding how courts consider psychological trauma in crimes of passion. It also led to reforms in banking regulations and stricter oversight of expatriate financial professionals. For the families left behind, the aftermath was devastating. Amora Khalil, now a single mother of 3, retreated from Dubai's social scene. Her family's influence helped shield the children from media attention, but the psychological impact was profound. The twins, old enough to understand some of what had happened, required extensive counseling. James's assets became the subject of complex international litigation. The UAE Central Bank froze accounts linked to his fraudulent activities, while legitimate assets were claimed by both Sarah's and Amora's legal teams. The process of untangling his financial web would take years. The case triggered significant changes in Dubai's expatriate banking community. Financial institutions implemented stricter background checks and monitoring systems. The UAE Central Bank established new protocols for detecting unusual patterns in international transfers. Cultural implications reverberated through Dubai's society. The case sparked discussions about the intersection of Western and Islamic marriage laws, the role of women in expatriate communities, and the pressures of maintaining social status in Dubai's competitive environment. Support systems emerged in response to the tragedy. The British Business Council established a confidential counseling service for expatriate families. Local women's organizations created support groups for those dealing with marital betrayal and financial abuse. Preventive measures became a priority for both financial and social institutions. Banks implemented new fraud detection systems, while expatriate organizations developed programs to help newcomers navigate cultural and legal complexities. The case became the subject of multiple documentaries and books. BBC's Death in Dubai, the James Mitchell story, exposed the vulnerabilities in international banking systems. Netflix's Double Life series explored the psychological aspects of living with long-term deception. The lasting effects of the case continued to shape Dubai's legal and social landscape. Law firms reported increased inquiries about international prenuptial agreements. Financial institutions strengthened their compliance departments. Social service organizations developed new programs for supporting expatriate families in crisis. Sarah Mitchell's case became a cautionary tale in Dubai's expatriate community, a reminder that beneath the gleaming facades of success, devastating secrets could lurk. The perfect life she thought she had built with James had been an illusion, but its destruction had real and far-reaching consequences. 5 years after the verdict, a journalist interviewing Sarah in prison asked if she regretted her actions. Her response was telling, "I regret that it came to this. But James destroyed more than just our marriage. He destroyed trust, hope, and the futures of 2 families. Sometimes I wonder if he would have destroyed even more if it hadn't ended when it did." The legacy of the Mitchell case continues to influence Dubai's development as a global financial hub. Stricter regulations, better support systems, and increased awareness of the pressures facing expatriate families all emerged from this tragedy. The perfect facade of expatriate life had cracked, revealing both vulnerabilities and strengths in Dubai's multicultural society. As Dubai continues to attract ambitious professionals from around the world, the Mitchell case serves as a powerful reminder that success built on deception cannot stand, and that the quest for the perfect life can sometimes lead to devastating consequences. In the mountain town of Crestwood, the tale of 2 sisters, Elena and Isabel Morrison, unravels, a story woven with affection, rivalry, and unresolved tensions. Elena, the elder, was the embodiment of virtue, compassionate, accomplished, and married to Nathan Carter, a celebrated chef who owned a popular gourmet restaurant. Their union was admired throughout Crestwood, epitomizing an idyllic love story. Elena and Isabel were raised in a modest home. Their parents were local artisans known for their craftsmanship. From a young age, it was evident that the sisters were distinctly different. Elena was always composed and courteous, earning the pride of her parents. She excelled academically and was well-liked throughout Crestwood. It seemed destined that she would lead a significant life, settle down, and start a family. Isabel, in contrast, was vibrant and often unpredictable. Equally intelligent, she was recognized for her adventurous spirit and occasional defiance. As they matured, their paths diverged further. Elena pursued a career in education, while Isabel experimented with various occupations but never settled on one. When Isabel returned to Crestwood, her charismatic influence was more noticeable than ever. She had a knack for navigating out of tricky situations and often used her charm to achieve her desires. Her romantic endeavors were intense yet fleeting. She thrived on the initial thrill but quickly grew restless, leaving a trail of wounded hearts, which only enhanced her reputation as the unpredictable sister. After completing her studies, Elena returned to Crestwood and immediately caught the attention of Nathan Carter. He had come to Crestwood to launch his restaurant and was captivated by both the town's charm and Elena. Their romance blossomed swiftly, leading to a picturesque wedding celebrated by all. Nathan's venture flourished, and they settled into a charming home amidst the mountains. A seemingly perfect life, yet the facade of perfection occasionally cracked. Elena, always meeting others' expectations, began to yearn for more. She had shelved her dreams of travel and new experiences to support Nathan's culinary ambitions and their life in Crestwood. Nathan, while successful, sometimes felt the weight of his responsibilities and the constraints of their serene life. He adored Elena deeply, but occasionally felt stifled by the need to maintain an impeccable image. Into this complex dynamic, Isabel returned to Crestwood, claiming a desire to reconnect with her roots after years of city hopping. In truth, she was fleeing a broken relationship and mounting debts. Despite their differences, Elena welcomed Isabel with open arms, offering her sanctuary as she figured out her next steps. This gesture highlighted the enduring connection between the sisters, despite the divergent roads they had traveled. As Isabel settled into life at Nathan's gourmet restaurant in Crestwood, the dynamics among the 3 of them began to subtly yet significantly shift, setting the stage for a drama that would shake Crestwood to its core, forever altering their lives. Initially, Isabel's presence seemed to rejuvenate Nathan and Elena's relationship. Their evenings were filled with laughter and shared memories as the sisters reconnected, and Nathan played the role of the attentive husband and brother-in-law. However, as days turned into weeks, Isabel's true intentions began to surface. Her gaze lingered on Nathan a little too long. Her casual touches became more frequent and deliberate. She found reasons to be alone with him, asking for help with culinary techniques, seeking advice on photo shoots, or just catching him alone in the kitchen late at night after Elena had retired. Nathan, initially oblivious to Isabel's advances, found himself increasingly enchanted by her vibrant personality. Unlike Elena, who was steady and dependable, Isabel was spontaneous and exhilarating. She listened intently to his ideas for new dishes and restaurant expansions, asking insightful questions that made him feel truly appreciated. In those moments, Nathan felt a surge of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Nathan was a man of integrity, dedicated to his wife and the life they had built. He tried to keep his distance from Isabel, finding reasons to immerse himself in his work or to take on extra culinary challenges that kept him away from home. But Isabel was persistent. She recognized the inner conflict in Nathan's eyes and saw it as an opportunity rather than a barrier. She began to weave a careful web of seduction, playing on his uncertainties and unfulfilled aspirations. One evening, while Elena was at a school board meeting, Isabel orchestrated what appeared to be an innocent dinner with Nathan. She prepared his favorite meal, opened a bottle of exquisite wine, and created an intimate setting that was hard to resist. As they talked deep into the night, Isabel skillfully steered the conversation towards Nathan's dreams and passions, areas where she knew Elena had not fully connected with him. Nathan felt a mix of flattery, desire, and overwhelming guilt. He stumbled over his words, trying to steer the conversation back to safer topics, but Isabel had already sensed her advantage. She leaned in closer, her hand brushing his. "Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to be truly understood? To be with someone who sees you for who you really are?" The tension in the room was palpable. Nathan knew he should leave, should end this precarious flirtation before it escalated, but he felt paralyzed, unable to detach from Isabel's allure. As Isabel kissed him passionately, Nathan's resistance crumbled. In that moment, the foundation of his marriage began to reveal cracks, setting off a chain of events that would lead to a profound tragedy. The weeks following that fateful night transformed into a whirlwind of clandestine encounters and escalating guilt for Nathan. What began as a momentary lapse evolved into a full-blown affair, with Nathan and Isabel devising clever ways to meet without Elena finding out. Their rendezvous ranged from brief encounters in the back rooms of the restaurant to well-orchestrated trips under the pretense of culinary research, far from the prying eyes of Crestwood. Isabel reveled in the thrill of their secret relationship, each meeting fueling her sense of triumph over her sister. For Nathan, the affair was a blend of excitement and self-reproach, leaving him exhilarated yet filled with remorse after each encounter. Isabel, adept in manipulation, knew precisely how to keep Nathan ensnared. She played the ideal companion, oscillating between being a passionate lover and a compassionate listener. She attended to his frustrations about his career and the aspirations he had yet to fulfill, providing the understanding and support he craved. "I've never met anyone like you, Nathan," she would whisper during their intimate moments. "You deserve so much more than this quiet life here." Her words were carefully crafted to instill seeds of discontent in Nathan's mind about his life with Elena. She conjured visions of a future brimming with excitement and freedom, free from the constraints of small-town expectations. Nathan found himself increasingly torn between his growing feelings for Isabel and his loyalty to Elena. The strain of leading a double life began to manifest in mood swings and unusual behavior that Elena could not ignore. At home, Nathan's guilt was evident through his alternating distance and excessive affection, as if trying to compensate for something. He immersed himself deeper into his culinary projects, taking on more initiatives than ever, using his restaurant as both a diversion and an alibi for his frequent absences. Isabel, for her part, maintained the facade of the attentive sister-in-law flawlessly. She would engage Elena in lengthy discussions, feigning interest in her day-to-day concerns while secretly reveling in her duplicity. Occasionally, a glimmer of guilt would cross Isabel's face, a brief recognition of the pain she was inflicting upon her sister. But these moments were fleeting and quickly suppressed by her desire for Nathan and her deep-seated ambition to outshine Elena. As their affair deepened, Nathan and Isabel began taking greater risks. They started meeting in more public spots around Crestwood, driven by their mutual attraction and becoming less cautious of the potential consequences. There were close calls. A restaurant patron nearly saw them together, and a local friend of Elena's spotted them at a cafe in a nearby village. Each brush with exposure only intensified their connection, making the risks seem like part of the excitement. But as the weeks weeks turned into months, the stress of their secret started to take its toll. Nathan, who had once found the affair exhilarating, now felt perpetually tense. His guilt was overwhelming, affecting both his professional life and his personal relationships. He began to wonder if his feelings for Isabel were worth jeopardizing everything he had built with Elena. Isabel, sensing Nathan's inner conflict, intensified her efforts to keep him close. She demanded more of his time and became more vocal about her feeling. Her tactics grew more blatant, preying on his guilt and desires simultaneously. As the affair escalated to its peak, neither Nathan nor Isabel realized that their fragile web of lies was about to unravel. Meanwhile, Elena, unsuspecting at first, started noticing subtle changes. A strange new perfume on Nathan's clothes, secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and a growing emotional distance that was hard to ignore. Ironically, it was Isabel who became Elena's confidant during this period, offering comfort and reassurances that only deepened the betrayal. As time passed, Elena could no longer dismiss the doubts creeping into her mind. She became more vigilant about the inconsistencies in Nathan's explanations about late nights at the restaurant and supposed supplier meetings. She noticed Isabel's lingering looks at Nathan, the barely hidden desire in her eyes. One day, while sorting laundry, Elena found a matchbook from a bed and breakfast in a neighboring village. An inn she knew was not on any of Nathan's travel routes. The discovery sent a cold shock through her, confirming her worst fears. Torn between confronting the truth and fearing what it might reveal, Elena became consumed with anxiety. She withdrew from her social circles, unable to discuss her suspicions without making them feel more real. Her nights were restless, filled with unsettling dreams, and she found herself observing Nathan and Isabel closely, looking for any clue that might confirm her suspicions. In a moment of desperation, Elena thought about hiring a private investigator, but decided against inviting strangers into their private affairs. Instead, she resolved to confront Nathan and Isabel individually, hoping to pressure one of them into confessing. Little did she know, this decision would trigger a chain of events that would lead to a confrontation more catastrophic than she could have imagined, permanently altering their lives. The day of reckoning arrived on a stormy late autumn afternoon. Elena had spent the morning steeling herself for this confrontation, rehearsing her words, determined to remain composed despite the impending heartbreak. When Nathan walked in, shaking rain from his coat, he was met by the sight of his wife standing in the room, her expression a mask of barely contained emotions. The tension was palpable, and he immediately sensed that their carefully maintained facade was about to crumble. "We need to talk," Elena began, her voice quivering slightly despite her best efforts. "I know about you and Isabel." Nathan's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled for words. In that quiet moment of shock, Elena saw the truth plainly written on his face, and her last shred of hope evaporated. "How long?" she demanded, her voice rising. "How long have you been seeing my sister?" Nathan's shoulders slumped in defeat, realizing there was no point in denying it any longer. "Elena, I'm so sorry. It just happened." Elena interrupted him with a bitter laugh. "You never meant to? What, did you just stumble into her bed? How could you do this?" Her pent-up anger and hurt burst forth, filling the house with her loud accusations and questions. Nathan could only stand there, absorbing her fury, his weak apologies doing nothing to stem the tide of her wrath. As their argument reached its peak, the front door opened and Isabel stepped in, stopping short at the explosive scene. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen, caught in a tableau of betrayal and guilt. "Isabel, how timely of you to join us. We were just discussing your affair with my husband." Isabel's eyes darted between Elena and Nathan, her mind scrambling for an exit. Nathan, caught between the two sisters, tried to intervene. "Please, let's just calm down and talk about this rationally." His plea only redirected Elena's fury. In a burst of anger, Elena grabbed a vase from the coffee table and hurled it across the room, narrowly missing Nathan. It shattered against the wall, punctuating her word. The noise seemed to jolt Isabel from her defiant stand. For the first time, a flicker of remorse crossed her face. Nathan and Isabel exchanged a look of helpless guilt before slowly making their way to the door. As it closed behind them, Elena collapsed onto the sofa, her body racked with sobs. The life she had cherished, the future she had envisioned, had crumbled in just a few moments. Outside, as the storm raged on,
Elena's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, shame, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. In that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion the final tragic act of their saga. The bartender, Hank, a seasoned observer of the Crestwood locals, watched with concern as Elena downed one drink after another. He had seen many patrons drown their sorrows at Crestwood Tavern, but the wild look in Elena's eyes tonight was especially troubling. "Another," Elena slurred, her gaze intense. Hank hesitated, but the determination in her eyes compelled him to comply. He poured another whiskey, neat, silently hoping it would be her last for the evening. As the night progressed, the tavern emptied, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and her drinks. The alcohol dulled the acute pain of betrayal, replacing it with a chilling resolve. Around midnight, Hank suggested it might be time for her to head home. "Need me to call you a cab, miss?" he asked. Elena waved him off, clumsily rummaging through her purse for her car keys. "I'm fine," she insisted. "I just need to get out of here." Hank tried to intervene, but Elena was already staggering toward the door. She managed to start her car in the deserted parking lot, its engine breaking the silence of the night. She drove off, her vision blurred and reactions sluggish, navigating the winding mountain roads that lay ahead. As she drove, Elena's mind was a whirl of emotions: anger at Nathan and Isabel's betrayal, shame for not having seen the signs sooner, fear of what lay ahead. Her speed increased as she took on the perilous curves of Mountain Pass. Then, disaster struck. Her dulled reflexes couldn't handle a sharp turn. The tires screeched, and the car began to slide. In a moment of terrifying clarity, Elena realized her mistake, but it was too late. The guardrail gave way with a horrific noise, and suddenly her car was airborne, plummeting toward the rocky terrain below. At dawn, Officer Liam Murphy received a distressing call. A hiker had discovered a wrecked car at the base of Mountain Pass, a notoriously dangerous stretch. With a heavy heart, Murphy approached the scene, dreading what he might find. The car was a mangled mess, barely recognizable after the violent crash. As the rescue team worked to retrieve the vehicle, Murphy began the grim task of the investigation. The license plate, miraculously intact, identified the vehicle as belonging to Elena Morrison. Murphy's heart sank. He knew Elena well, as did everyone in Crestwood. The burden of delivering such news to her family was immense. As the morning unfolded and the extent of the tragedy became evident, whispers spread throughout the town. Elena Morrison, known for her sensibility and dedication, had died in what appeared to be a tragic accident caused by drunk driving, a stark contrast to the woman everyone thought they knew. Detective Sarah Watson, brought in from the nearby city to lead the investigation, immediately sensed discrepancies in the case. Her keen eye noticed details that seemed off. The absence of skid marks on the mountain road suggested no attempt to brake, the odd angle of the car's descent off the cliff, and the reports of Elena drinking alone, which her friends adamantly claimed was out of character. Upon arriving at the Carter residence to deliver the grim news, Watson felt the tension thick in the air. Nathan Carter's reaction to his wife's death was subdued and seemed tinged with guilt, while Isabel Morrison's presence in the house at such an early hour raised immediate red flags. In the days that followed, Detective Watson dove deep into the investigation, peeling back the tranquil facade of Crestwood to reveal the underlying tensions. Her first stop was the Crestwood Tavern, where she spoke with the bartender, Hank. Hank recounted Elena's state on the last night of her life, describing how she had been heavily drinking. "She was knocking him back like there was no tomorrow," he confessed, his expression marked by regret. "I tried to stop her from driving." This account starkly contrasted with the description of Elena by her friends and colleagues, who knew her as cautious and responsible, not one to recklessly drink and drive. Watson's suspicions deepened. Watson next focused her attention on Nathan and Isabel. Their behavior post-Elena's death was peculiar. Rather than mourning separately, they appeared to find comfort in each other's company, exchanging meaningful glances and ceasing conversations abruptly when others approached. A significant breakthrough came when Watson interviewed Elena's close friend, Olivia Chun. Initially reluctant to speak ill of the deceased or add to the family's grief, Olivia eventually opened up under Watson's empathetic questioning. "Elena had confided in me just days before it happened," Olivia disclosed, her voice trembling. She suspected Nathan was having an affair with Isabel. This revelation cast the entire case in a new light, prompting Detective Watson to delve deeper into the relationships
relationships and secrets that might have led to the tragic events of that fateful night. This confession illuminated the entire case for Detective Watson. She wasted no time in verifying the details, delving into Nathan and Isabel's recent actions. Bank statements revealed suspicious transactions, hotel bookings, and costly gifts that coincided with Nathan's supposed supplier meetings. As evidence mounted, Watson summoned Nathan and Isabel for separate interrogation. Under her rigorous questioning, their concocted stories began to unravel. Isabel was the first to break. "Yes, we were having an affair," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "Elena found out that night. We had a massive argument, the three of us, but I swear we didn't realize she had left the house afterward." Confronted with Isabel's admission, Nathan also confessed to the affair but vehemently denied any role in Elena's tragic death. "We made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I loved Elena. I would never have wanted this to happen." Watson believed their claims that they hadn't directly caused Elena's death, but she understood that their actions had set the catastrophic sequence of events in motion. Her report painted a clear picture. Elena, devastated by the betrayal, turned to alcohol for solace. Her decision to drive that night, though ultimately her own, was profoundly influenced by the emotional turmoil caused by Nathan and Isabel's deceit. Ultimately, no criminal charges were filed in relation to Elena's death, but in the court of public opinion, Nathan and Isabel were judged severely. The scandal of their affair spread throughout Crestwood, irreparably tarnishing their reputations and ensuring that the memory of Elena's demise would haunt them forever. As time passed, the acute pain of the incident began to fade, but its impact lingered in Crestwood. The town gradually returned to its serene exterior, but its inhabitants carried with them the knowledge that beneath the surface of their seemingly peaceful community, powerful emotions and hidden secrets could swirl with devastating consequences. The tragedy of Elena Morrison had indelibly altered the soul of Crestwood, marking its history and its people permanently.